Chapter 68. Ming Shi, stop. At the door, Han Mingyue gloomily looked at the two people who were at daggers drawn. Let her go. Humph. Han Mingshi angrily swung his hand and jumped up, disappearing from the roof. Han Mingyue stared at the woman in black in the courtyard with warning eyes. Don't provoke Ming Shi. Hee, as long as he doesn't provoke me, why would I provoke him? Mingyu, he is still your brother. We are friends, aren't we? The woman laughed softly. Bang! Han Mingyue took a step back and slammed the door in her face. Han! Ming! You! The woman in black's eyes flashed with shock as she shouted hatefully. She saw that the candles in the room were extinguished very quickly. It was obvious that the person inside was preparing to sleep. She snorted and turned to leave the quiet and dark courtyard. The woman in black walked out of the inconspicuous courtyard. Immediately, a few men in black came forward. Mississippi, the woman nodded and said coldly, let's go back. The leader of the men in black could see that the woman was not in a good mood and did not dare to say anything. He waved his hand and a few men protected the woman as they quickly left in the dark night. Whoosh, an arrow pierced through the air with the force of 1,000 caddies. The leader of the men in black quickly pulled out his sword and tried to block the arrow. But that arrow was not so easy to block. He only felt the sword in his hand shake, and even the hand holding the sword suddenly became numb. The arrow brushed past the sword and shot towards the woman in black who was behind him. Ah! Miss! The arrow flew past the woman's face and was firmly fixed on the wall by the roadside not far away. The woman in black looked back at the arrow that was deeply embedded in the wall. Her body went soft and she almost fell. Just a little more and that arrow would have destroyed her face even if it did not pierce through her head. Mississippi, the people around her hurriedly went over to support her, but the woman waved her hand to shake them off. Then, she raised her hand and slapped the black-clothed man's face. Trash! The black-clothed man lowered his head sadly. Feng Jiao. A burst of clear laughter came from the roof not far away. The woman raised her head and saw Feng Jiao dressed in flamboyant red clothes. He was leisurely sitting on the roof and looking down at her sorry state. Feng Jiao raised his handsome eyebrows and gestured to her with a bow in his left hand. Feng Jiao, how dare you? The woman gritted her teeth. I'm so scared. It's not illegal for me to shoot one or two sneaky men in black in the middle of the night, right? Perhaps Lord Qin would even be grateful to me for contributing to the security of the capital. Don't kill him for me. The woman pointed at the roof with her slender finger, her voice filled with killing intent. As soon as she thought of that arrow, she couldn't help but want to tear the arrogant man in front of her into pieces. You want to compete with me in terms of numbers? Do you think I'm afraid of you? Feng Jiao lazily raised his hand and waved behind him. A similar group of black-clothed people silently appeared on the roof, but each of them held a bow and arrow in their hands. They directly drew their bows and aimed their arrows accurately at the narrow street below. The woman in black was so angry that her eyes were about to burst into flames. She gritted her teeth and arrogantly said, Feng Jiao, do you dare to kill me? Feng Jiao regretfully shook his head, I don't dare. Hearing his answer, the woman's confidence increased. She slightly raised her chin and said, since you don't dare, then scram far away. Fuck. This young master hates arrogant women the most. Feng Jiao's evil phoenix eyes flashed with a cold light. He quickly raised his hand and shot an arrow. Another arrow flew past the woman's clothes and landed at her feet. Feng Jiao. Feng Jiao lazily looked at her. His gaze was even more disdainful than the woman's. Don't call me that. This young master won't fall in love with you. Someone told me to warn you to stop messing around. Otherwise, tonight's arrow will not hit the wall. Even if you don't believe in this young master's archery, you shouldn't doubt them. He raised his hand and pointed at the black-clothed man Feng Jiao. No. This is impossible. The black-clothed woman stared at the black-clothed man behind Feng Jiao in shock. How could he? Feng Xiao, you dare use the Black Cloud Cavalry without permission. TSK, a woman who deceives herself. Feng Xiao impatiently sat up and said, just remember this young master's warning. Or else you'll blame this young master for not telling you the next time you're disfigured. The black-clothed woman lowered her eyes and did not say anything. Feng Xiao was not in the mood to argue with her. He said to the people behind him, finish what you need to do. Everyone can leave. So, several sounds of wind breaking through the air. The people who were protecting the woman fell to the ground. Only the leader was left holding his sword tightly. But he knew in his heart that the hand holding the sword did not have any strength after that arrow. If another arrow came, he would not be able to block or escape. Feng Xiao, you casually used the Black Cloud Cavalry. Aren't you afraid that the people in the palace will find out? The black-clothed woman finally opened her mouth. Feng Xiao waved his hand and said with a smile, you should first think about how to explain the sudden disappearance of so many people by your side. In the end, the woman did not say anything else. She brought the last remaining guard and left this deserted street with hatred. When she left, the black-clothed man on the roof also quickly disappeared into the night. Feng Xiao turned around and flipped over the roof. He entered the room through the half-open window. He looked at the man sitting inside and said with a helpless smile, how is it? Is eldest young master Su satisfied? Su Qingchen sat peacefully by the window. In front of him was a jug of wine and 2 wine cups. He raised his hand and poured the 2 cups of wine. Putting down the jug, he raised his head and smiled at Feng Xiao, thank the prince for me. The news that the third young miss, the future Princess Ding, had been kidnapped by bandits was shocking in the capital. Not long after Yi Li had been kidnapped, the news had already begun to circulate in the capital. If one tried to forcefully suppress the rumors, it would only make it more conspicuous and become more and more intense. Therefore, no matter if it was the Yi family, the Su family, or the Li palace, no one publicly expressed an opinion. The next morning, when Yi Li sat in a carriage with all kinds of rewards from the palace and was escorted by the Su family's second young master and third young master from the Su family back to the Yi family, the rumors in people's hearts gradually began to shake. After all, the people who happened to pass by unintentionally saw that the Yi third young miss was fine in both her appearance and body. It did not look like she had just been kidnapped. As for the 2 young masters of the Su family, even third young master Su, who was said to have the worst temper and could not hide his thoughts, did not seem to be acting strangely. So, yesterday's news was just a malicious rumor? Yi Li indifferently listened to Qing Shuang's long-winded narration of the rumors she had heard from outside. She laughed inwardly. Of course, third brother could calmly come out to meet people because he had already vented most of his anger on those blind bandits last night. Thinking of last night when she had gone down the mountain with Mo Xiaoyao, the thick smell of blood in the mountain stronghold, and third brother's murderous appearance, Yi Li believed that the scholarly Su family was about to produce a general. Yi Li did not plan to ask how Mo Xiaoyao would deal with those bandits. No matter if they were bandits who had fled to the capital or local bandits, it was always a good thing to have one less group of people. Chapter 69. Third Miss Yi. A clear male voice came from outside the window. Qing Luan immediately pulled out her sword and pointed at the young man who suddenly appeared outside the window. Yi Li smiled and pressed down Qing Luan's arm. She turned around and said with a smile, young Master Han, how have you been? Outside the window was the kidnapper Han Mingyue who had just left last night. Han Mingyue smiled bitterly and helplessly. Third miss, do I look good to you? As soon as he entered the courtyard, he could feel the covetous eyes in the dark. He had no doubt that if he acted rashly now, the master of the Tianyi pavilion would definitely disappear silently from the world. Taking out a wooden carving box from her sleeve and putting it on the windowsill, Han Mingyue said, this is for third miss to get over the shock. It's also a wedding gift to congratulate third miss and Xiaoyao. I don't know if I can make it in time to drink a cup of wedding wine. Yi Li nodded. Without looking at the box, she asked, is young Master Han ready to leave the capital? Han Mingyue smiled and said, I've been frightened a lot recently. Staying in Jiangnan makes me feel more at ease. I welcome Miss Yi and Xiaoyao to come to Jiangnan together when you have time. At that time, I will definitely do my best as a host. Yi Li smiled and said, young Master Han's words make us a little ashamed. Han Mingyue raised her eyebrows and said, then, the previous misunderstanding is written off? Yi Li's eyes turned slightly and said with a smile, the misunderstanding between you and me is written off. As for the misunderstanding between you and Mo Xiaoyao, it's your own business. Han Mingyue was a little disappointed, but she also knew that she was forcing Yi Li. She also appreciated that Yi Li knew how to behave appropriately. She no longer delayed and said, now, I'll take my leave. Take care. I won't see you off. After Han Mingyue left, Qingluan stepped forward to take the box on the windowsill and said discontentedly, Miss, why are you so polite to that kind of person? Yi Li turned and sat down. She smiled and said, he was also very polite to us yesterday. Yi Li knew that if Han Mingyue hadn't been wary of Mo Xiaoyao from the start, they wouldn't have had the chance to escape unscathed. She believed that Han Mingyue was afraid of Mo Xiaoyao, but she didn't believe that Han Mingyue was afraid of Mo Xiaoyao. If it wasn't because of him, how could Miss? The people outside are still talking about Miss being kidnapped. It's so unpleasant. Qingluan didn't think that Han Mingyue was polite to them. If it wasn't because of him, how could Miss be ridiculed by others? Yi Li said faintly, if it wasn't him, it could be someone else. Not everyone happens to know Prince. After taking the box from Qingluan and opening it, Yi Li was also a little surprised. There was a thick stack of banknotes neatly placed in the box. 2 banknotes worth 10,000 taels and a dozen banknotes worth 1,000 taels. Qingluan took a look and couldn't help but exclaim, Miss, this. Yi Li raised her eyebrows. She looked a little embarrassed. 20,000 taels of banknotes was equivalent to more than 200,000 taels of silver. Even Yi Li was embarrassed to accept such a large sum of money. Beside the banknotes was a pair of top-grade white jade dragon and phoenix pendants. Just by looking at the quality of the jade, she knew that it must be extraordinary. After thinking about it, Yi Li closed the box again and passed it to Qing Shuang. Get ready, I'm going to the Prince Ding mansion. Qing Shuang held the box carefully. She also saw it just now. She had never seen so much money since she was young. Boo-hoo, I'm so scared, yes, Mississippi, Li. Li. Murong Ting's voice came from outside before she entered the door. Yi Li smiled and got up to welcome her. Qin Zheng, Hua Tianxiang and Qin Yuling, the sister of the capital city magistrate Qin Mu whom she had only met twice, came to visit Yi Li together. Murong Ting entered the room first and grabbed Yi Li, asking repeatedly, Miss Li, are you okay? Yi Li smiled and said, if I'm not okay, why would I be standing here? Why are you guys here? Qin Zheng covered her lips and smiled faintly. Ting ran over early in the morning to drag me and Tian Xiang over to look for you. I told her that you were completely fine, but she insisted that she was worried and had to come over to take a look. We met Miss Yu Ling on the way and came together. Mu Rongting hugged Yi Li and waved her fists. If I find out which bastard is the one who spread the rumors, I'll slap his face so hard that even his parents won't be able to recognize him. This is simply too much, 10,000 times more than that bastard Ling Haoyu. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. Yi Li smiled at Qin Yuling, Miss Qin, thank you for coming to see me. Qin Yuling smiled shyly, actually. I'm here to apologize to Miss Yi on behalf of my brother. He just took charge of the capital city magistrate and something like this happened, implicating Miss Ye's reputation. Yi Li shook her head. Looking at Qin Yuling's expression, she knew that she must have come behind Qin Mu's back. Actually, there was no reason for this kind of thing to be blamed on Qin Mu, the capital city magistrate. Even in her previous life, no matter how advanced the technology was, there was never a lack of crime. Furthermore, at this time, people's energy was limited, so how could they manage everything? Lord Qin is the parent magistrate of the capital city's people. He wholeheartedly serves the people and is known as the Iron Face Magistrate. It's just some rumors, Miss Qin doesn't have to care about it. Rumors stop with the wise. If you ignore them, those people will find it boring and naturally won't spread it again. Hearing Yi Li's words, Qin Yuling also let out a sigh of relief. She and her brother relied on each other for survival since young. Although her brother didn't say it, she knew that this matter involved Ding King's manor, Minister's manor and Su family. Her brother was only a third-ranking magistrate and Qin family didn't have any backing. If she wasn't careful, she could be used as a scapegoat. Thank you, Miss Yi. Hua Tianxiang smiled. Miss Qin, you don't have to thank her. Those vile people are jealous of Miss Li and want to ruin her reputation. Lord Qin can't control everyone's mouths, right? Miss Li, looking at your dressing, are you preparing to go out? Hua Tianxiang noticed Yi Li's clothes and asked, could it be that we came at a bad time? I just planned to make a trip to Ding King's manor. It's not anything important, it won't be too late to go later. Yi Li said. Oh? Murong Ting rolled her eyes and smiled maliciously, so our Miss Li is already so familiar with Prince Ding. Yi Li rolled her eyes in annoyance. Murong Ting didn't care at all and said cheerfully, why do we have to personally go to Ding King's manor? Wouldn't it be enough to send an invitation to Prince Ding to come out? At the same time, we can also let those talkative vile people know that no matter how hard they try, they won't be able to separate Miss Li and Prince Ding. Qin Yuling looked at Murong Ting with some doubt. Does Miss Murong know who did it? Just call me Murong. Murong Ting said confidently, who else could it be? It must be that Prince Li who can't bear to see Miss Li live well. I've never seen a man more petty than him in my life. He's a perfect match for Yi Ying. Yi Li was speechless. Mo Jingli was really wrong this time. However, it should be because his character was too bad that he was so easily suspected, right? The other three people looked at each other. However, after seeing Murong Ting's confident expression and thinking about the grudges between Mo Jingli and Yi Li, they all agreed with Murong Ting's guess. Even Qin Yuling had an expression of not expecting Prince Li to be such a person. Chapter 70. Prince Li's temper was not good. This was not a secret among the nobles in the capital. However, if one were to observe carefully, they would discover that His Highness Prince Li, who was supposed to be proud after the wedding, had an even worse temper than before. Especially when he went out early in the morning and heard people talking about Yi Li, his mood should be incomparably good. But he found that when he passed by, people would intentionally or unintentionally look at him strangely, or they would quickly shut up and change the topic to talk about unrelated things. Even when he was drinking tea, he could feel the eyes of everyone in the tea house secretly looking at him. Something happened to Yi Li, that woman, and the one being laughed at should be Mo Xiaoyao. Why did he feel like everyone was laughing at him? Most of the people in the capital were still kind, so when they saw Mo Jingli appear, even if they knew that they could not offend the emperor's younger brother, they still gave him a look of disdain. TSK. What kind of person was he? It was fine if he broke off a girl's engagement for no reason, but he also couldn't bear to see her doing well. Not only did he ruin the girl's reputation, but now he was spreading such vile rumors. If this was a normal girl, wouldn't she have been forced to die? This kind of person, even if he was a relative of the emperor, would still be called scum. Prince. The people following Mo Jingli were also frightened by the pressure around their prince. What is going on? Mo Jingli gritted his teeth and asked. Guard A looked around and sadly found that he was the closest to the prince. The other guards had already moved to the side and said in a trembling voice, replying to Prince, everyone is talking about Yi. Third young Miss Yi. I know that they are talking about that woman. What does talking about that woman have to do with I? They all looked at I like I was scum. Did they think that I did not see it? Shouldn't they be mocking that woman and laughing at Mo Xiaoyao for being cuckolded? This. Someone said that Prince, you can't bear to see third young Miss Yi and hate that third young Miss Yi is about to happily join the Ding Palace and was rude to you at Chuxiang Pavilion before, so you deliberately spread rumors. Cough cough, to destroy third young Miss Ye's reputation. Imperial bodyguard A, who intended to use his fastest speed to make things clear, had his face flushed red. Before he could finish his words, he looked at his prince in horror as he crushed the folding fan in his hand into pieces. What did you say? Mo Jingli's body was emitting waves of energy. Everyone who passed by couldn't help but take a detour. Prince. Prince. It wasn't me who said it, it was all the people in the capital who said it. Guard A said in his heart, feeling wronged. In short, Li Palace's reputation had reached a new low after the prince seduced his fiancée's younger sister and bought things without paying. Li, Zheng come up quickly. There's no one upstairs, let's sit outside. A clear female voice rescued the almost frozen imperial bodyguard A. When he saw his prince's gaze quickly turned to the staircase, the imperial bodyguard quickly curled himself into a ball and hid in a safe place. Mu Rongting, wearing a delicate and beautiful red dress, took the lead to walk up to the second floor. She even turned around and waved to her friends behind her. The child who was leading the way in front of her simply wanted to cry. Miss Mu Rongting, it's not that there's no one upstairs. We are here in one of the best tea houses in the capital. It's that everyone was scared away by Prince Li. When she turned around, Mu Rongting saw Mo Jingli, whose face was as black as ink. She couldn't help but look back and consider whether to change to another tea house. But at this moment, Hua Tianxiang and the others also walked up. Thus, the group of 5 girls helplessly stared at each other. Yi Li was even more helpless. She even suspected that she really had some ill-fated relationship with Mo Jingli in her previous life. No matter where she went, it seemed that as long as she went out, she would run into him. Yi Li didn't know. Actually, this wasn't too strange. Because even though the capital was the most prosperous city in the Dechu state, it wasn't that big compared to the big cities in her memory. And the nobles couldn't go to the same place as the commoners. Basically, they could only go to a few places. So, unless it was someone like Yi Li who didn't go out much, or someone like Mu Rongting who often ran around, they would basically only go to a tea house where they knew each other. Mr. Li. Mu Rongting looked at Yi Li apologetically. She really didn't think that the newly married Prince Li would come to a tea house to drink tea alone in the middle of the day instead of accompanying his wife at home. It's alright, let's just stay here. Yi Li also knew that she couldn't blame Mu Rongting. Besides, she didn't have any intention of avoiding Mo Jingli. They were all in the same capital. They were all from noble families and were even relatives. Where could she avoid him? Indifferently nodding at Mo Jingli, Yi Li pulled Qin Zheng and Qin Yuling to a relatively quiet corner. Mu Rongting stuck out her tongue. She pulled Hua Tianxiang and hurriedly followed. Sai, do you think Prince Ding will come or not? Mu Rongting asked in a low voice. She didn't grow up in the capital, so she wasn't familiar with Prince Ding. Hua Tianxiang was full of confidence. She nodded and said, "Don't worry, my grandfather said that Prince Ding is a pretty good person. Since he received the invitation, he will definitely come." Qin Yuling said in a low voice, "Then let's leave early. Let's not disturb Mr. Li and Prince Ding's conversation." Mu Rongting giggled and said, "It's still early. We came out early. Prince Ding definitely hasn't come out yet. It won't be too late for us to change places when he comes." Huh, did you see the expressions of those people downstairs just now? They became very strange when they saw us come in. I was afraid that their eyeballs would fall into their teacups. Hua Tianxiang snorted and said, "Those people probably thought that Mr. Li was hiding at home crying. Of course they would be startled when they saw us suddenly appear." Qin Zheng covered her mouth and laughed. "I've also never seen so many people stunned at the same time. This is the first time in my life that I've been the center of attention." Yi Li looked at her friends chattering about how they felt when they went out today. She could only shake her head in amusement. In fact, the rumors didn't seem to be as fierce as she had expected. Mo Xiaoyao and her uncle must have done something in secret. At the very least, most people looked at her with surprise or sympathy. It wasn't the disdain and contempt that she had thought would appear. It seemed that most people didn't believe that she had been kidnapped. Yi and the others sat in a relatively remote corner, chatting among themselves. Mo Jingli sat alone by the window, drinking tea like it was wine with a calm face. Because he was far away, he couldn't hear what they were talking about. However, he could still feel that they were in a good mood. It seemed that they weren't affected by the rumors at all. Mo Jingli couldn't help but gnash his teeth. It was clearly Yi who had gotten into trouble, but Yi herself acted as if nothing had happened. Instead, he had to take the blame. However, if he had to rush over and argue with Yi, even Mo Jingli felt that he couldn't bring himself to do it. Thus, he could only let the cold wind around him scare away the surrounding guests and continue to drink tea. Chapter 71. Aya, Li. Prince Ding is here. Just as they were feeling depressed, they heard Murong Ting's loud voice not far behind them. Everyone on the second floor could hear it. Everyone looked up and saw Murong Ting excitedly lying on the windowsill and looking down. Qin Zheng helplessly pulled her down and turned to Yi with a smile. Go down and pick up Prince. Hua Tianxiang covered her mouth and snickered. She waved her hand and teased, "It doesn't matter if he doesn't come back. We will go shopping after eating the snacks. Anyway, there is no extra seat for Prince Ding." Hearing this, the few remaining guests on the second floor began to regret choosing to sit closer to the inside because they were afraid of Prince Li's cold air. Now, they could only perk up their ears and try their best to listen to the girls at the table in the corner. Yi saw this and couldn't help but laugh. Gossiping was indeed an indispensable nature for people of the same era. Under the direct and obscure gazes of the crowd, Yi got up and walked downstairs. When she passed by Mo Jingli's table, she could clearly feel Mo Jingli's fierce glare. Yi was helpless. Some people were born to be at odds with each other and couldn't be forced. Seeing third Miss Yi calmly go downstairs, the diners upstairs looked at Mo Jingli with more complicated eyes and expressions. Seeing third Miss Yi so calmly appear in public and calmly go to Prince Ding's appointment, it really didn't seem like something had happened. On the other hand, Prince Li's face was gloomy and ferocious. It was clearly like he was angry that his conspiracy didn't succeed. People secretly exchanged glances and made silent discussions. Mo Jingli finally seemed to be unable to bear this strange atmosphere. He put the teacup back on the table heavily, stood up, and looked through the half-open window at the street downstairs. He turned around and went downstairs with a sullen face. The moment Yi came down from upstairs, the entire lobby instantly quieted down. When Yi walked out with a gentle smile on her face, everyone was about to open their mouths to discuss when they saw Mo Jingli's gloomy face. Then, there was another period of silence. But after seeing how the two of them acted, at least the people present were more inclined to sympathize with Yi. When Yi walked out of the tea house, the Prince Ding mansion's carriage had just stopped. Jean was about to lift the curtain to invite Mo Xiaoyao down. "Xiaoyao!" Yi softly called out. When Jean saw Yi, he respectfully stood to the side. Yi nimbly stepped onto the low stool and got into the carriage. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and raised his eyebrows. "Why did you get down?" Yi sat down across from him and said with a smile, "Tian Xiang and the others said that there was no place to sit because there were too many people, so they chased me out. It's all their fault. I originally wanted to go to the Prince Ding mansion again tomorrow." Mo Xiaoyao smiled. "Their fault is very timely." "What do you mean?" Yi asked in confusion. Outside, Jean had already started driving the carriage forward again. Yi thought for a moment, then poked her head out to give a name. She just happened to see Mo Jingli standing at the entrance of the tea house, his eyes gloomy as he looked at their carriage. Mo Xiaoyao said, "This morning, the entire capital was spreading the rumors that Jingli deliberately spread yesterday to embarrass you." Yi was stunned. She kind of understood why Mo Jingli's expression was so ugly. With Mo Jingli's personality, it would be strange if he felt comfortable being wronged. Thinking of Mu Rongting's confident guess, it wasn't just her imagination. Is there something that Li wants to talk to me about? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li's dazed face and asked. Yi Li came back to her senses and nodded her head. This morning, Han Mingyue sent over 20,000 taels in gold notes, 10,000 taels in silver notes and a pair of jade pendants. I originally wanted to bring it with me when I go to the Prince Ding mansion tomorrow, but it's not good to bring it with me when I go out with Tian Xiang and the others. Mo Xiaoyao didn't care as he shook his head and said, that's a gift from him. Just keep it. Yi Li was speechless. A few 100,000 taels in one go. Han Mingyue dared to give it to her, but she was too embarrassed to accept it. I'll have someone send it to the Prince Ding mansion tomorrow. You can do as you see fit. I have enough money to spend. Mo Xiaoyao sighed helplessly. Li. Han Mingyue sent it to you, so it's yours. You can rest assured. You don't have to feel that you owe him any favors. Han Mingyue, that kind of person, would feel heartache if he spent an extra tael of silver. He was willing to send it over to you as an apology gift because he felt that it was worth it. You don't have to promise him anything. Yi Li smiled and said, I really don't have any plans to promise him anything. Yi Li secretly guessed that Han Mingyue must have done something to let Mo Xiaoyao down. This time, he was involved in this kind of matter again. She didn't expect that Mo Xiaoyao would let him off so easily. Han Mingyue probably felt guilty, but he couldn't find a way to make up for it. That's why he didn't care about the cost and tried to curry favor with her. It was a pity that Yi Li didn't plan on doing anything that would trigger the flower of friendship between former good friends. So Han Mingyue's money was probably wasted. So you asked me out today for this matter? Mo Xiaoyao asked. Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's low and pleasant voice, Yi Li, who was thinking about something, felt her heart jump. She said embarrassedly, it's really nothing big. Sorry to disturb you. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao didn't seem to be interested in the things that Han Mingyue sent over, Yi Li couldn't help but be curious about how wealthy the Ding Palace was. I'm usually very idle. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. Since we're already out, can you accompany me to a place? Yi Li nodded. I'm not very familiar with the capital. You can make the decision. After getting Yi Li's permission, Mo Xiaoyao instructed a Jin, who was driving the carriage. A Jin immediately turned the carriage in another direction. In the carriage, Yi Li asked curiously, Fenghua Building? You're not planning on giving me any jewelry, right? I have a jewelry store that specializes in jewelry. Mo Xiaoyao smiled at her, isn't it normal to give your fiancé jewelry? Can't it be? Yi Li kept her mouth shut. Could she say that he didn't care about visiting her treasure pavilion? Fertile water doesn't flow into 10,000 fields. Even if she hadn't been in a relationship before, she knew that these words would spoil the mood. But, was Mo Xiaoyao trying to curry favor with her? Yi Li felt a strange irritation in her heart. But looking at Mo Xiaoyao's gentle and calm expression, she couldn't tell what he was thinking. Yi Li could only helplessly give up. Wasn't it a happy thing to have a man who wasn't hateful and was her future husband giving her jewelry to curry favor with her? Fenghua Building was a very famous jewelry store in the capital. Most of the jewelry they sold was jade. The reason why it was loved by the noble ladies of the capital wasn't just because of its high price and exquisite products. More importantly, the jewelry sold here was never the same. Every style was unique. This made the noble ladies who didn't like the same things as others particularly fond of this store. Yi Li had once considered going down the same high-end route in Hidden Treasure Pavilion, but unfortunately, Hidden Treasure Pavilion didn't have a very outstanding designer and sculptor. Yi Li herself only had a smattering of knowledge about the so-called jewelry design, so she could only helplessly give up. After entering Fenghua Building, the shopkeeper immediately came up to greet them. Even when he saw Mo Xiaoyao in a wheelchair, he was only momentarily stunned. Then he revealed a polite smile and greeted them. So it's Prince Ding and Yi San Xiaojie. Your presence at Fenghua Building brings light to our humble store. Prince, Yi Xiaojie, please come in. Chapter 72. Ushering the two in, there was immediately a young girl with delicate features who served fragrant tea for the spring. Yi Li smiled slightly as she drank the tea. She examined the elegant and comfortable decorations in the room and couldn't help but sigh. This was truly the luxury of a distinguished guest. No wonder Fenghua Tower was the favorite place for the nobles in Jing to visit. Just because of this attentive service, they were afraid they wouldn't be able to earn the customers' money. Perhaps because of Mo Xiaoyao's status, the shopkeeper personally stood in front of them to serve them. Does Prince want to choose accessories for Yi San Xiaojie? This seems to be Yi San Xiaojie's first time visiting this little shop. What kind of accessories do you like? Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao drank the tea and said in a light voice, "First pick a few good ones and bring them over for me to see." The shopkeeper made a sound of acknowledgement and turned to personally pick up the items. Yi Li asked in confusion, "We're really here to buy accessories?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "Li, you're thinking too much. Since we're out here, what's wrong with buying a few pieces that you like?" Yi Li asked suspiciously, "Is my usual appearance embarrassing you?" Thinking about it, it wasn't impossible. Yi Li's jewelry wasn't little. It had all been left behind by Su Shi when she was alive. However, Yi Li didn't like being burdened, so her appearance, especially her hair accessories, was maintained at a level that wouldn't be disrespectful. She couldn't accept being dressed extravagantly. With the status of the Ding Wang Fu, if the future Wang Fei dressed too plainly, it was possible that she would feel embarrassed. Mo Xiaoyao helplessly shook his head. He looked seriously at Yi Li and said, "If you really have a head full of pearls, then I won't be able to stand it. In reality, I didn't know where to go, so I brought you here to see." Feng Zhiyao said that the jewelry here isn't bad. Yi Li looked suspiciously at him, trying to find a trace of discomfort on his face. However, a certain person was too calm. Even if he said such innocent words, he was still elegantly and calmly reading an ancient book in the study. Yi Li could only tell herself that she was overthinking things. Thinking about it, although a certain someone now looked like a gentle and refined gentleman, it was said that in the past, there were times when he was young and frivolous, when he rode a horse on a slanted bridge, and when he was full of women. Soon, the shopkeeper returned with 2 boxes. Placing it on the table, he carefully opened it and said, "It's rare for Prince and third young Mistress Yi to visit this small shop. This set of jewelry is our boss's latest design and personally made. And I'm afraid this is the only one this year. What do you think, Miss Yi?" Hearing the shopkeeper speak so seriously, Yi Li also became a little curious. This was a set of top-grade sapphire jewelry. Sapphire wasn't the most valuable jade artifact, but the quality of this set of jewelry was something that Shen Deshuan and Yi Li had never seen in the pavilion of treasures that were better than this. More importantly, the simple yet elegant design was like an elegant magnolia flower quietly blooming in the moonlit night, making people feel a sense of tranquility and gentleness from the bottom of their hearts. There was no woman in this world that could escape the temptation of exquisite jewelry. Yi Li sighed in her heart. This set of jewelry consists of 2 magnolia hairpins, a bracelet, and this headpiece. The shopkeeper saw Yi Li's admiring gaze and immediately opened the other box to show the headpiece inside. The light green jade did not have any complicated patterns or gemstones inlaid. It was just an ornament made of beautiful orchids quietly lying in the silk brocade box, releasing a faint brilliance. "Do you like it?" Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and said with a smile, "It suits Miss Li very well. It really is very beautiful." Yi Li nodded. "Just this one. Come back to my residence to get the banknotes." Seeing that the two were very satisfied, the shopkeeper who had made a big deal was also very happy. "Yes, Miss Yi, do you want to take it away or do we have to send it over?" Mo Xiaoyao lightly said, "Just send it directly to the Yi residence." Greetings to the 2 princesses. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao were accompanied by the shopkeeper as they walked out of the inner room. They heard the waiter at the door respectfully greet them. The shopkeeper was stunned and quickly apologized to the 2 of them, then went forward to greet them. The person who had just come in also saw the 2 of them. The Zhaoyang eldest princess was stunned and involuntarily said, Xiaoyao. She quickly walked over and stopped a few steps away from Imo Xiaoyao. She softly said, Xiaoyao, are you accompanying Miss Yi to buy things? Imo Xiaoyao's eyes slightly moved. He nodded and said, yes, eldest princess, we haven't seen each other in many years. Zhaoyang princess' face had a trace of sadness as she nodded and said, we really haven't seen each other in many years. You're now. Well. When you get married, if Miss Yi has nothing to do, why don't you come to the princess residence and accompany this old woman? Yili gently nodded and said with a faint smile, thanks to the eldest princess love, I'll definitely come and disturb you when the time comes. Zhaoyang princess lightly sighed. She pulled Yili and said with a smile, although this is only the second time I've seen Miss Yi, your mother and I had some friendship when we were young. Miss Yi, see if there's anything else you like. Consider it a meeting gift from your elder. Yili was somewhat helpless. Just as she was about to refuse, Mo Xiaoyao spoke first, Zhaoyang aunt. Don't scare Yili. We still have some matters to attend to, so we'll leave first. Aren't you with Zhaoran princess? Don't spoil the princess mood. The beautiful woman who had been ignored to the side was the Zhaoran princess that she had seen at Imo Jingli's wedding banquet a few days ago. Hearing Imo Xiaoyao's words, she only gave a faint snort. Zhaoyang princess wrinkled her brows and could only sigh, it's fine. If Miss Yi has any matters in the future, just send someone to my residence to tell me. Yili softly thanked her and accompanied Mo Xiaoyao out of Fenghua building. Getting on the carriage, Yili could clearly feel that Mo Xiaoyao's mood wasn't very calm. She didn't say much and casually picked up a book from the carriage to read. But thinking back to the Zhaoyang eldest princess's words and expression in the shop, she felt an inexplicable strangeness. She felt that the eldest princess's attitude was a bit similar to Han Mingyue's. It seemed like she wanted to get close to Mo Xiaoyao, but for some unknown reason, she could only maintain a certain distance. There was a faint sense of guilt and a desire to make it up to him. And this kind of compensation was clearly not something that Mo Xiaoyao was willing to accept, so they put it on her. For example, Han Mingyue's attitude towards the banknotes and the Zhaoyang princess's attitude. What did these two people do to wrong Mo Xiaoyao? Sorry, Li, in the carriage, Mo Xiaoyao softly said with a faint trace of guilt in his eyes. Yili raised her brows in confusion. Mo Xiaoyao helplessly smiled and said, I originally wanted to take you out to relax. Yili suddenly realized. This man was apologizing to her for being in a bad mood just now. But this kind of bad mood when meeting someone you didn't like was unavoidable. Or was it because she was acting like an unreasonable little girl that he felt that he needed to apologize? It's nothing, you're not in the mood today. Let's go back first. We'll come out another day when you're in a good mood. In reality, she wasn't in the mood to go shopping with a depressed man. She didn't know how to comfort people. If she had that free time, she might as well do something else. After yesterday's matter, she found that she still had a lot of things to do. Chapter 73. Mo Xiaoyao was silent for a moment and then nodded, I'll send you back. Yili nodded and gave an order to a Jean who was driving the carriage outside. The carriage headed towards the minister's manor. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yili's calm and relaxed expression and his expression softened a lot. He couldn't help but smile, Li doesn't seem to be worried at all. Yili shrugged and said, there was nothing to worry about in the first place. But I'm guessing that the matriarch at home is very worried. If the Ding King's manor broke off the engagement, the matriarch would probably want to send her to a nunnery to cultivate. Not only would this ruin the Yi family's reputation, it would also cause them to lose the large amount of betrothal gifts from the Prince Ding mansion. It would be enough for the matriarch and Wang Shi to feel distressed for a long time. Nothing will happen. At most in 1 or 2 days, this matter will be over. Yili nodded and didn't say anything else. If something really happened to her last night, what would happen? Yili didn't ask this question and Mo Xiaoyao also didn't mention it. They both had a tacit understanding. Perhaps even if something really happened, Mo Xiaoyao would still cover it up and marry her. Perhaps he would kill Han Mingyue. Perhaps Yi Li would kill Han Mingyue herself, but she wouldn't marry him. Who was the mastermind behind the scenes? Mo Xiaoyao didn't plan on telling her, and she also didn't plan on asking. They were prepared to spend the rest of their lives together, but they didn't plan on treating each other as their most important person. Just like how Yi Li would never think that Mo Xiaoyao was more important than her family, in Mo Xiaoyao's heart, there was someone more important than her. At the Yi Manor's entrance, Mo Xiaoyao personally saw Yi Li walk in. Only then did he put down the curtain and say to Ajin, "Let's go back." Ajin silently looked at the slowly closing door and hesitated before asking in a low voice, "Prince, why didn't you tell Miss Yi, Ajin, let's go back?" "Yes, Prince." Yi Li had just entered the door when Qing Xia and Qing Shuang, who had been waiting at the side, came up to report that their uncle had come and was waiting to see their young miss. Yi Li was puzzled. Is it eldest uncle or second uncle? He had just returned from the Su family this morning. Did something happen again? Qing Shuang said, "The two granduncles are here. She's talking to the old lady in Rongla Hall." Yi Li helplessly looked at her clothes and said, "Forget it, let's just go over." When he entered the Rongla Hall, he saw his two uncles sitting and drinking tea. The old Madam, Minister Yi, and Madam Wang all sat on the side with a strange look on their faces. Seeing Yi Li enter, old Madam Yi let out a sigh of relief. She smiled at Yi Li and said, "Lear, the two uncles specially came to visit you. Why did you run out? Why haven't you come over to greet them?" Yi Li obeyed and went forward to greet them. Su Hongyu waved his hand and said, "Forget it, Lear just came back from the Su family today. There's no special visit." Su Hongyan also nodded with a sullen face and said, "That's right. Eldest brother and I had something to tell Lear yesterday, so we took her over. We didn't expect that she would cause so much trouble. It's our Su family that didn't think it through." Old Madam Yi and Minister Yi looked at each other awkwardly. Although Su Hongyan said that it was the Su family's fault, how could they not hear the blame for the Yi family? After the rumor spread, the Yi family did nothing. They even sent someone to the Su family to ask about it. How could the Su family not feel bitterly disappointed? But old Madam Yi looked at the slim and graceful young girl in front of her and still couldn't make up her mind. She really couldn't tell whether Yi Li really went to the Su family yesterday or was kidnapped by bandits like the rumor said. If something really happened to him, then, Su Hongyan looked at old Madam Yi and Minister Yi and snorted in dissatisfaction. Su Hongyu, who was beside him, glanced at him and smiled at Yi Li. "Didn't you say that Li went out with Miss Hua and Miss Qin? When Uncle came over, I heard that the two young ladies from the Qin family and Hua family were dragged by General Murong's daughter to cause trouble for second young Master Leng. Could it be that Lear also went to cause trouble?" Yi Li didn't expect Murong Ting to cause such a ruckus. She quickly shook her head and said, "Lear and Prince Ding went to Fenghua building and met Zhaoyang eldest princess and Zhaoran eldest princess. Then they came back. It's Lear's fault for making Uncle wait for so long." "Oh? Went to Fenghua building with Prince Ding? It's okay. It's not a bad thing for young people to walk around." Su Hongyu was obviously very satisfied with Yi Li's answer. Su Hongyan also nodded and casually complained, "Your aunt often reminds Qingze to accompany Miss Qin to go out for a walk. That kid just has to be a blockhead. It's as if saying half a word more will make him suffer." Yi Li thought of Su Qingze's cold expression and couldn't help but smile. Zhang was obviously the most gentle and pleasant one among them, but she had a cold and serious fiancé. They had been in the capital for so long. It seemed that other than the time when second aunt sent a gift to the Qin family, the two hadn't officially met. Without looking at Minister Yi and old Madam Ye's changing expressions, Su Hongyu directly turned to Minister Yi and said, "I have something to tell Lear alone." "I don't know." Minister Yi had always been afraid of this brother-in-law. He didn't dare to say no. He quickly said, "Then Lear will take eldest brother and second brother to your courtyard to sit. Later, brother will prepare a banquet. Two brothers, please come." Su Hongyan got up and said indifferently, eldest brother has an appointment with old Su to play a few rounds tonight. There's no need for a banquet. Seeing Su Hongyu's indifferent expression, Minister Yi had to give up and let Yi Li invite the two uncles to talk in private. Old Madame Yi looked at her son's useless appearance and glared at him with dissatisfaction. Unfortunately, the current patriarch of the Su family had too much power and had to give up. Returning to Qingyi Xian, Su Hongyan looked at the decorations inside and outside. He nodded with satisfaction and turned to go out, leaving the room for his eldest brother and niece to talk. Eldest uncle and second uncle came specially. Do you have something important to tell Lear? Yi Li asked Su Hongyu to sit down and personally poured tea while asking. Su Hongyu looked at her and smiled. It seems that Lear's complexion is good. You're not affected by those rumors. Is that so? Yi Li served tea and just sat down. She smiled helplessly and said, rumors are everywhere. We have to live. What's more, the situation now is much better than what we originally thought. Su Hongyu looked at her seriously and said, then, if the situation is worse than what you originally thought, what will you do? Being able to escape unscathed last night was indeed very lucky. But if something really happened? Lear, have you thought about it? Yi Li silently looked at the clear tea in front of her and nodded. Lear has made Uncle worry. But, no matter what happens, I still have to live. Lear may not be afraid of death, but as long as there is hope, I will definitely live. At least, I won't die because of the rumors. Speaking to her, Yi Li couldn't help but bite the corner of her lips. Even in the Dechu state, where the customs were still open, a woman's chastity was still far more important than life. She didn't know if her eldest uncle could accept her words, but these were her heartfelt words. Yi Li definitely wouldn't give up her life for a mistake that didn't belong to her. Chapter 74. Very good, this is the daughter of my Su family. After a long time, Su Hongyu put down his teacup and said calmly. Yi Li was startled and quickly raised her head to look at eldest uncle. Su Hongyu looked at Yi Li with a trace of sadness in his eyes. Although the men of the Su family have always been scholarly, they have always been strong enough. No amount of suffering is enough to make us give up what belongs to us. However, the daughters of the Su family are indeed intelligent, but they are also more fragile than normal women. Just like your mother, if Xiaomei had been as strong as you, how could she have ended up like this? Eldest uncle. Every time her mother was mentioned, eldest uncle would be very sad. Yi Li thought of her weak and beautiful mother in her memories and couldn't help but sigh. When her mother was young, she had been protected too well by the Su family, so she couldn't accept the reality of marriage. She could only slowly wither away in the Yi family's courtyard. Su Hongyu waved his hand. Prince Ding is a very outstanding man. Even now, I still think so. However, no matter how you look at it, he is not a good choice for a husband. Lear, do you know why the Su family didn't object to this marriage? Yi Li looked at eldest uncle's gentle but slightly dignified gaze. She hesitated and said, the emperor's order is difficult. That can be considered one reason. Su Hongyu said, but if the Su family really isn't willing, it's not like there's no solution. Your maternal grandfather still has some face. If your maternal grandfather personally goes to the capital to ask the emperor to retract the order, the emperor won't refuse. Yi Li was shocked and quickly said, absolutely not. Maternal grandfather is already old and has finally left the turmoil of the capital. How could he get involved in it for Lear? Not to mention other things, her maternal grandfather was already over 70 years old this year. Yi Li couldn't accept having the old man travel all the way to the capital. A trace of relief flashed across Su Hongyu's face. He reached out to pat Yi Li and said, your maternal grandfather knows that Lear is a filial child. Yi Li lowered her head and thought for a while. She frowned in confusion and said, Lear really can't think of it. Uncle, please enlighten me. Su Hongyu sighed and said, because of your identity, if your surname is Su, the Su family can legitimately refuse the emperor's betrothal for you. She could even marry into an ordinary scholarly family in Bingzhou. The Su family didn't need more glory and wealth. However, your surname is Yi. Other than the imperial family, there is also the Yi family that can decide your marriage. Moreover, you were previously married to the late emperor. Although His Majesty annulled the engagement between you and Prince Li, he betrothed Yi Ying to Prince Li. Yi Ying is said to be the daughter of the first wife of the Yi family, but in fact, she is just the daughter of a concubine. The emperor wants to put your father in an important position and dotes on Yi Jiaoyi. If you want to satisfy the world's elites, then you can't marry worse than Yi Ying. In other words, if you don't marry Prince Ding, then you will still be betrothed to other princes, or even enter the palace as a concubine. There is no need to consider entering the palace. Uncle and your grandfather have considered all the unmarried princes and can only choose Prince Ding. Yi Li nodded in agreement with her uncle's words. Actually, Prince Ding is much better than Li originally expected. Although now I realize, it might be more troublesome than originally thought. But it's not impossible to accept, right? Uncle also said that Prince Ding is an excellent man. Su Hongyu looked at Yi Li strangely and said, Li, what did you think Prince Ding was like? Yi Li smiled with some embarrassment and said, isn't there a rumor outside that Prince Ding is disabled and disfigured? Is he seriously ill? Anyone could imagine what such a tragic person would look like. So the current Mo Xiaoyao was already unexpectedly good. Su Hongyu obviously could imagine it too. She glared at her unhappily and said, if that's really the case, then you might as well think of a way to poison him. Even if you can't marry for the rest of your life, it's still better than marrying a cripple. Yi Li didn't care if she would marry a cripple or not. In any case, with the family background of the Prince Ding mansion, it was impossible for her to personally serve Mo Xiaoyao. She would just treat it as spending the rest of her life with him. He wasn't that crippled now, but there were more troubles than expected. Yi Li could already foresee that her life after marriage would not be as good as she imagined it to be if her uncle was worried and personally came to tell her these things. Only when your brother mentioned it last night did I notice that the Yi family is simply a bunch of bastards these years. And you, after staying in the capital for so many years, you don't even know the slightest bit about the people in the capital. Su Hongyu glanced at Yi Li unhappily. Yi Li hurriedly lowered her head to reflect on her mistake. It wasn't just her father who was afraid of her uncle. She was afraid of him too. In reality, other than her brother, she had never seen anyone who wasn't afraid of her uncle. Perhaps Mo Xiaoyao could be counted as one. Her uncle's scolding was right. These years, she hadn't stepped out of the house. It was true that she had deliberately separated herself from her surroundings. Of course, Madame Wang had played a part in this, but the main responsibility still lay with her. Even though she had long accepted her current life, Yi Li still felt that her previous life was real in the depths of her heart. Her current life was more like a game or a dream. Of course, last night's risk made her feel a bit more real. How much do you know about the things that Hong Yan gave you before? Su Hongyu asked directly. Yi Li knew that her uncle was only referring to the information that her second uncle had given her regarding the relationships and important people in the capital. She hurriedly said, I memorized it all. Su Hongyu shook his head, there's no point in memorizing that kind of thing. You have to understand the relationships within. You know everyone in the Duqua household. You've also met noble consort Lu in the palace. Can you tell me what you think of the relationship between the current empress and noble consort Lu, the Duqua household, and the Lu household? Yi Li was astonished. Wasn't this going too far? However, she still seriously considered Su Hongyu's words. After a long time, she said, Li has never met the empress. However, I am quite familiar with the people in the Hua household. I have also met Princess Changel once. The empress is the current first wife. Although she is not favored, she should be a magnanimous and virtuous woman. As for noble consort Lu, she is somewhat arrogant and has a cold temperament. However, the emperor dotes on her very much and has 2 sons and 1 daughter. Therefore, the relationship between these two shouldn't be very harmonious. However, I haven't heard of any disagreements between the Hua and Lu families. Prime Minister Lu and Minister Yi disliked each other in court. At present, they could be considered evenly matched. However, the situation in the palace clearly showed that noble consort Lu was superior. Su Hongyu nodded, reminding her, that's correct. However, people's hearts are fickle. In particular, the hearts of those in the palace are even more difficult to fathom. In this aspect, you still need to put in more effort. It seems that Hongyu has only given you the current information. He probably thinks that you know everything from the early years. Yi Li was somewhat ashamed. A few years ago, especially when Mo Xiaoyao's accident happened to be when her memories were in chaos and her body was weak. After she recovered, she rarely paid attention to the outside world. She truly did not know about those old matters. Second uncle probably did not expect that she would not even know about those matters that caused such a stir. How much does Li know about the Ding household? Yi Li understood that her eldest uncle had specially come over to teach her the basics. The first master of the Ding household was Mo Lanyun, the younger brother of the founding emperor of the Dechu state, Mo Qingtian. At the founding of the state, the founding emperor conferred upon him the title of Prince Ding, a hereditary prince. It was passed down for 3 generations. During the reign of the late emperor, the powerful officials bullied the young Prince Ding. At that time, Mo Lufang returned to the capital from the border and killed the powerful officials to support the young prince. He was then conferred the title of regent prince. When the late emperor was 16 years old, Mo Lufang returned to the throne. When the late emperor was 29 years old, Mo Lufang passed away due to illness. His eldest son, Mo Xiaowen, inherited the title. The following year, the late emperor passed away. In the current 3rd year, Mo Xiaowen was ordered to go to war. During the journey, he passed away due to illness and had no children. At the age of 18, Mo Xiaoyao inherited the title and led the troops to war. He was ambushed and lost his soldiers. He almost died on the battlefield. Although he managed to turn defeat into victory, he also paid a heavy price. 3 months later, Mo Xiaoyao's fiancée passed away due to illness. From then on, the Ding household could be said to have completely disappeared from the capital. Chapter 75. Is there anything else? Yi Li frowned and continued, every generation of the Ding king's residents produced talented people and they were well versed in both political and military affairs. Instead, the imperial family who came from the same bloodline paled in comparison. The most outstanding one was the first Prince Ding, Mo Lanyun. It was said that if he didn't marry a princess from the previous dynasty as his wife, he might have a higher chance of ascending the throne than the great ancestor. Then there was Mo Lufang, who was able to rule the country through martial arts. As for Mo Xiaoyao, he was once hailed as a genius who wasn't inferior to his ancestor. If it wasn't for the fact that he was only 13 years old when Mo Lufang passed away, the throne might have been inherited by him from the start. The room was silent. Yi Li silently picked up the teapot and poured some tea for Su Hongyu. Only then did she hear Su Hongyu ask, "That's right." In a short 5 to 6 years, the Ding king's residence was ruined. What was supposed to be a peerless general fell to the mortal world. The legend of the Ding king's residence being invincible was also shattered. Li, do you know that at that time, the judgment that Mo Xiaoyao was a genius who wasn't inferior to his ancestor was made by your maternal grandfather. Because of this, your maternal grandfather had regretted it for more than 10 years. Uncle, what do you mean? Yi Li was startled. Politics had never been severed since ancient times. Even now, with the decline of the Ding king's residence, various private speculations had never stopped. But hearing it from her maternal uncle's mouth, Yi Li couldn't help but be shocked. Under the shock, Yi Li quickly calmed down and said, "I heard that Prince Ding was indeed brilliant when he was young." Then even if maternal grandfather didn't say those words, the people of the Ding king's residence would still be targeted. Maternal grandfather only admired his talent and wasn't able to foresee the future. This matter, maternal grandfather doesn't need to blame himself. Su Hongyu nodded and praised, Li is already very knowledgeable at such a young age. Uncle is telling you this in hopes that you will understand the situation of the Ding King's residence. Although in the eyes of outsiders, the Ding King's residence has already declined to the point that it only has a false reputation left. But Yili looked at him and continued, but the Ding King's residence still has a trump card that the imperial family doesn't dare to touch him. Not bad. If not for this, Mo Xiaoyao would have died of illness long ago. The reason why no one dared to touch him was because they were afraid of harming him. The deaths of the previous 2 generations of Prince Ding have already raised suspicions. If something were to happen to Mo Xiaoyao, I'm afraid it would shake the foundation of the country. Yi Li sighed softly. She felt so cold that she gripped the teacup to absorb the warmth. Did His Majesty choose Lear because he was also afraid of the Su family? Isn't he afraid that after the marriage between the Su family and the Ding family? Su Hongyu's gaze was cold. The ancestors of the Su family will never betray us as long as the royal family doesn't do anything to the Su family. There are people who believe such words. Yi Li was puzzled. Even a signed treaty could be torn to shreds at any time, let alone an oath. Su Hongyu glared at her in displeasure. This was written into the Su family's family rules. The Su family has been passed down for hundreds of years and is known for its integrity. Yi Li shrunk her neck and silently asked curiously, Uncle, did the Su family make any oaths to the previous emperor? Cough cough. Su Hongyu coughed a few times and glared at Yi Li in annoyance. Yi Li could only shrug her shoulders and hold her chin in silence. That's why, as a famous family that had not fallen for hundreds of years, how could they be so pedantic? It's not that we won't betray, it's just that the reward for betrayal isn't high enough. In the end, he glared at Yi Li. Su Hongyu sternly said, in short, unless it is absolutely necessary, the Su family will not betray the royal family. The Su family did not lack fame or wealth, and they were not obsessed with power. The throne? What was the use of that? A wise ruler had to be prepared to exhaust himself to death. If they wanted to enjoy messing around, they had to be prepared to go down in history in infamy. Li understands. Eldest uncle, who do you think wants to ruin my marriage with Prince Ding? If it's not the emperor? Yi Li asked. Su Hongyu shook his head. That's hard to say. Qing Chen only said that it was a woman. But we filtered through almost all the women related to Prince Ding, and still couldn't find out who it was. Prince Ding himself should know. Did he say anything? At the mention of this, a trace of displeasure flitted across Su Hongyu's elegant face. Seeing Yi Li shake her head, he snorted softly and said, he should know what he's doing. If something else happens that shouldn't happen, he's better off not being her husband. The Su family can afford to raise their granddaughter. Li thinks that it might be a woman who admires Prince Ding. Yi Li didn't feel embarrassed in front of Su Hongyu, so she directly voiced her suspicions. Su Hongyu looked at her with a smile and said, a woman who admires Prince Ding? If you're talking about Prince Ding when he was young. At that time, at least half of the noble ladies in the capital adored him. But there wasn't a single one who had the ability to bribe the heavenly pavilion. Although Han Mingyue loves money as much as his life, he was also Prince Ding's best friend when he was young. He wouldn't provoke Prince Ding's fiancée for money. Then, what about the woman who admires Mo Xiaoyao and has a good relationship with Han Mingyue? Su Hongyu raised his eyebrows. There's one, but it can't be her. Yi Li blinked. Su Hongyu calmly put down his teacup and said, noble consort Lu. This time, it was Yi Li's turn to cough. Lu. Noble consort Lu. What's so strange about that? Noble consort Lu was known as the most talented woman in the capital. Even your eldest brother had never looked him in the eye. Instead, he spoke gently to Prince Ding at that time. Unfortunately, Prince Ding already had someone else at that time. Otherwise, they would have been a rare couple. Also, noble consort Lu was good at painting. Han Mingyue's painting skills were also known in the capital when he was young. The second volume of his painting of the Chu capital was of noble consort Lu. It's still priceless even now. However, after noble consort Lu entered the palace, this painting was bought at a high price. For some reason, Su Hongyu gave up on these heavy topics and began to gossip with Yi Li. Yi Li thought of the woman with cold eyes like pear blossoms in the palace. She was indeed worthy of being called a national beauty. Uncle, why did you say it wasn't her? Your eldest brother knew noble consort Lu. Although he didn't see her face and it's been so many years, your eldest brother is sure it wasn't noble consort Lu. Also, what kind of place do you think the palace is? A noble consort can casually walk around outside the palace with a group of people in the middle of the night. Yi Li nodded. She didn't really think it was noble consort Lu. Although she noticed that noble consort Lu despised her in the palace, she still deliberately picked on her. However, that woman's eyes didn't have any strong hostility or killing intent. Who was Mo Xiaoyao's original fiancé? Yi Li asked. She was really curious. What kind of woman could defeat noble consort Lu and win Mo Xiaoyao's heart? Also, it was reasonable to say that someone who could become Mo Xiaoyao's fiancé must be from a famous family. However, Yi Li searched her memory for a long time and couldn't find any famous noble family that had a beautiful daughter who died an unfortunate death 7 years ago. Su Hongyu glanced at her in disappointment and said, Su Zayati. Yi Li nodded. Sounds like a very beautiful woman. Su Hongyu looked at his niece expressionlessly. Once again, he regretted that he didn't insist on bringing Li Er back to the Su family to be educated. Look at how she was raised by the Yi family now. He was talking about her future husband's ex-fiancée. Even if she was dead, she should at least show some interest, right? Only then did the world-renowned Sir Su realize that when his niece mentioned Prince Ding or Prince Li, she had never shown the slightest bit of shyness that a girl should have. She had never even blushed. Chapter 76. Which family is this Miss Su from? There didn't seem to be any Su family in the capital. Why do you think Old Master Su came to the Prince Ding mansion to deliver the betrothal gifts? Old Master Su. Su Zayati is Old Master Su's granddaughter. Su Hongyu said lightly. Then why did Old Master Su come? He came to see what kind of woman Prince Ding, who was supposed to be his grandson-in-law, married. Also, Su Zayati's death was a great blow to Prince Ding, who was already seriously ill. Old Master Su treated Prince Ding like his own grandson, so he came to support the Prince Ding mansion. Looking at her uncle's unhappy face, Yi Li smiled helplessly and said, Uncle, I know what you mean. Prince Ding and I get along very well, so you don't have to worry. Su Hongyu looked at her disapprovingly and said, What do you mean by very well? If you are the first one he gives up when he has to make a choice, then how can that be called very well? Yi Li smiled lightly, but, if I have to choose between uncle, grandfather, cousin, and Prince Ding, I won't choose him. How long have we known each other? Family is naturally more important. You are husband and wife. In the future, you will live with him for the rest of your life, not with uncle and grandfather. Uncle, do you think Prince Ding is the kind of man who will give up everything as long as he cares about you? Yes, as long as you can capture his heart. After a long talk, Su Hongyu left a lot of official, secret, and unofficial records for Yi Li to read when she had time. Then, he left with Su Hongyan under Minister Ye's uneasiness. Yi Li looked at her father's complicated eyes and slightly bowed to him. Then, she leisurely returned to her own Qingyi pavilion to study the history books. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao's wedding was set for May 20th. It was said to be the best day in May. It was said that Yi Shangshu was not very satisfied with this date. After all, it was not a particularly auspicious day. Yi Ying's marriage situation had already made Yi Shangshu very angry. If Yi Li's marriage had any problems, Yi Shan and Yi Lin would not be able to get married. However, the Ding Palace and the Su family, including Yi Li herself, did not have any opinion on the auspicious date. Moreover, if they did not choose this date, then the wedding date would have to be pushed back to August at the very least. June and July were even less suitable for weddings. When Yili was kidnapped, no matter if it was the Ding Palace or the Su family, they would never allow the wedding to be postponed. Therefore, Minister Ye's dissatisfaction was naturally ignored. In the middle of May, Yi Li's leisurely life came to an end. The originally quiet Qing Yi Xian also became bustling with people coming and going. Every day, there were countless things that had to be sent to Qing Yi Xian. There were countless account books and lists that had to be personally reviewed by Yi Li. Even with the help of the two mamas, Yi Li was still very tired. When the people in the capital saw that the Yi family, Su family and the Ding Palace were not affected by the rumors and were preparing for the wedding, the half-believing rumors gradually subsided. "I'm so envious of Li. The Ding Palace's wedding will definitely be the grandest wedding in the past 10 years. In Qing Yi Xian, Mu Longting laid on the soft couch without any care for her image as she hugged the first-grade expensive silk that had just been sent over. Yi Li, Qin Zheng and Hua Tianxiang were sorting out the account books. Not far away, Yi Shan and Yi Lin were also quietly doing needlework. Outside the door, there was still the noise of people coming and going. Hua Tianxiang raised her head to look at her in the gap between looking at the account books and said, "Li, didn't invite you to be envious and jealous. If you have the time to talk nonsense, why don't you come over and see if there's anything you can help with?" "But, you're right." Qin Zheng was writing and drawing on the account books as she asked, "Does Wang Furen really not intend to help you with the wedding at all? If this spreads out, it won't be good for her reputation." Yi Li smiled faintly. "Old madam also added a lot of dowry. She's not feeling well these 2 days. She said that fourth sister is sick in the Li Palace and has to go over to take care of her. She left early in the morning." Mu Rongting snorted at this. Who has heard of a mother running over to take care of her daughter who has just been married for less than a month? But, could Ying really be sick? I actually didn't see her coming back to show off these days. Hua Tianxiang raised her eyebrows and smiled, then she has to have the ability to show off. If Li Wang treats her well, maybe she can come back to show off her newlywed bliss or something. But now I heard that Princess Xixia is still pestering Li Wang every day. It's already good that she hasn't become a resentful woman. Qin Zheng shook her head. She was not interested in these rumors. Instead, she was more concerned about Yi Li's marriage itself. I really don't know what Wang Furen is thinking. Everyone knows how many betrothal gifts the Ding Palace has sent. Even if the Yi family adds more, it won't be a loss to her. Isn't she losing face for the Yi family? Hua Tianxiang said, "It's not like you don't know what Wang Furen's background is. Even if she is now Yi Daren's legal wife, her status is not enough to preside over Li Er's marriage. At that time, I'm afraid old Madam Yi will have to appear personally. By the way, there is no woman in the Ding Palace who can make the decision." "Li, did Prince Ding mention who can make the decision in the Ding Palace?" Yi Li nodded and said, "Originally, Zhaoyang Grand Princess had this intention. However, although Prince Ding calls Zhaoyang Princess as aunt, it is said that they are of the same generation in terms of seniority. So Zhaoyang Grand Princess means to invite Shifu Grand Princess." "Wow!" Murongting cried out in surprise, almost jumping up from the soft couch. Seeing that everyone is looking at her, Murongting chuckles and says, "Great Elder Princess Shifu. She's the late Emperor's aunt. Even Prince Ding of the previous generation has to respectfully call her imperial sister. I heard that Shifu Grand Princess is 75 years old this year." Qin Jing nodded and said, "In fact, if it weren't for Li Er's marriage this time, I would have forgotten that this princess is still alive. I heard that this princess has stopped caring about the affairs of the world more than 20 years ago. I didn't expect that she could come out to support Prince Ding's wedding this time." Hua Tianxiang waved her hand and said with a smile, "It's nothing strange. My grandfather said that Great Elder Princess used to like Prince Ding the most. When Prince Ding was born, Great Elder Princess even held him. It was said that when Prince Ding had an accident and almost died, it was Great Elder Princess who took care of him day and night. In short, Prince Ding will invite Great Elder Princess to preside over the wedding, which shows his sincerity to Li Li," Murongting said with a smile. so I said that Li Er's wedding is probably the grandest wedding in the last 10 years. I heard that the dignitaries of other countries will also come to the wedding. Yi Li frowned and said, what does the wedding of Prince Ding Mansion have to do with the dignitaries of other countries? Li, don't underestimate the prestige of King Ding Mansion. King Ding Mansion has been established for 100 years, and it is not an exaggeration to say that it is powerful. Basically, all the countries close to the Chu state have dealt with King Ding Mansion. Yi Li nodded and said, I understand. They are here to see a joke. The only descendant of the prestigious King Ding Mansion, the current Prince Ding, was a disfigured disabled person in a wheelchair. What else could make the dignitaries of various countries happier than this? Perhaps the royal families of various countries were more interested in this wedding than the change of the emperor of the Chu state. Everyone was silent for a moment and couldn't help but sigh. Yes, those envoys of various countries definitely didn't come to congratulate Prince Ding on his wedding, but to see how the only descendant of King Ding Mansion, who had been silent for 7 years, looked like and whether he could still pose a threat to them. Chapter 77. Yi Li waved her hand carelessly and said, it's not a big deal. What can they do to me in the capital of the Chu state? If you have the time to worry about this, why don't you help me organize these things? Tomorrow, second aunt will look through them. Yi Li had a headache as she looked at the messy gift lists and account books in front of her. Only now did she know that Arabic numerals and double-entry bookkeeping were really good things. But now was not the time to be in the limelight. She would have plenty of time to slowly organize them when she arrived at the Ding King's residence. Hua Tianxiang and Qin Zheng looked speechlessly at the account books that still had more than half of them in front of them and weakly lowered their heads. When they returned home, they must learn from their mother how to manage the household. There were too many of these things. Yi Lin and Yi Shan listened to them chatting on the side. They were both envious and sympathetic towards Yi Li. But they also knew that they could not get a word in on this. They could only listen and lower their heads to do the work in their hands. Ha! Murong Ting, who was originally lying weakly on the soft couch, suddenly jumped up and rushed to the half-open window. She leaned out and looked around for a long time before retracting her head in confusion. Hua Tianxiang looked at her and said, what's wrong? Is there something outside the window? Murong Ting shook her head and looked at Yi Li without saying anything. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, I think I just saw a green bird fly by outside the window. Did Murong Ting also see it? Murong Ting blinked and said with annoyance, yes, I saw a very beautiful bird. Who would have thought that when I reached the window, I would disappear? Qin Zheng giggled and covered her mouth. Birds fly so fast, how could they wait for you? Hua Tianxiang gave her a sideways glance. When did you start liking birds? If you really like it, ask your father to catch one for you. Otherwise, just buy a beautiful one. You don't need to be so surprised. I'm happy. Murong Ting raised her small face and proudly laid back on the soft couch. She also glared at Yi Li without a trace. Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled. Of course, she knew what Murong Ting had heard. In the past few days, there had been a few strange people who wanted to visit the Yi residence without going through the main entrance, but they were all thrown out by the bodyguards that Imo Xiaoyao had sent to protect them in secret. However, it was rare for someone to barge in during the day. Miss, the Crown Prince of West Hill Genom of Gojoseon has sent a gift to congratulate you and Prince Ding on your wedding. Outside the door, the butler of the Yi residence came to report in person. Yi Li frowned and said, the Crown Prince of West Hill Genom of Gojoseon? Shouldn't the gifts be sent directly to King Ding's residence? The steward said respectfully, Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon said that this gift was specially prepared by Shiling for the future princess consort of Dinghua. Therefore, it must be sent directly to Miss to show the sincerity of Shiling Kingdom. Where is Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon now? Is father here? Yi Li asked. In the hall. Master has just returned and is accompanying him in the hall. The steward said. Yi Li nodded, I know. Please wait for father and Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon. I will go out later. The steward excused himself. Muong Ting pulled Yili worriedly and said, Yili, be careful when you go out. This Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon might not come with good intentions. Yili raised her eyebrows. The noble ladies in the capital did not know much about this. Muong Ting had followed General Muong for a long time when she was young, so she should know more than them. Qing Luan and others served Yili to change her clothes and redo her makeup. Muong Ting stood aside and said what she knew. The Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill is the younger brother of the current West Hill Emperor. He is also a famous general of West Hill. But 20 years ago, he was defeated by Prince Ding's father, the regent Mo Lufang. At that time, my father was only a small lieutenant. I heard from my father that Genom of Gojoseon was defeated miserably in the battle. He even lost an arm in the chaos. After that, Genom of Gojoseon sent people to assassinate the regent many times, but they all failed at the last minute. You know, the regent has died long ago. If Genom of Gojoseon holds a grudge, then this grudge could only be held on her and Mo Xiaoyao as Mo Liufang's son and daughter-in-law. So, Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon is here to find trouble? Qin Zheng's pretty face turned pale. She looked at Yili uneasily and said, should we send someone to inform Prince Ding? Yili shook her head and said, no need. Prince Ding should know very soon. Moreover, Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon would not come to make things difficult for a girl in the boudoir. That would be too embarrassing for Shilin State and Genom of Gojoseon. Even if he wanted to find trouble, he should be targeting Mo Xiaoyao. They were not married yet. Looking in the mirror, Yili saw that she had tidied up properly. She stood up and said, I'll go take a look first. You guys wait for me here. Muong Ting rushed to stand beside Yili and said firmly, I'll go with you. Tian Xiang and Zheng stay. Yili did not know whether to laugh or cry. Muong, I'm not going to war. Muong Ting insisted, I don't care. Even if I secretly follow you, it's fine. If that Crown Prince Shannon has any ulterior motives, I can save you. Plotting against the future Princess Ding in public in Dechu State. Only Muong Ting could think of such a thing. Hua Tian Xiang waved her hand and said, forget it. Leave her, take Muong with you. She just loves to watch the fun. Muong Ting did not care what they thought. She happily hugged Yili's arm and said, let's go, let's go. Father. After entering the hall, Yili realized that the steward's report was too careless. She thought that only her father and the guests would be present. She did not expect that Mo Jingli and Yi Ying would also be sitting with them. Muong Ting threw her a look that said, why is he everywhere? Yili helplessly smiled at her and went forward to greet Minister Yi. In front of outsiders, Minister Yi was very willing to play the role of a good father who doted on his daughter. He affectionately smiled at Yili and said, Li has come. Is Miss Muong also here? Muong Ting curled her lips and said with a smile, this junior has come uninvited. Please forgive me, uncle. Minister Yi smiled and said, not at all. This official is deeply gratified that Li has such a good friend as Miss Muong. Li Miss Muong, this is Crown Prince Shannon of Shilin State, Genin of Gojoseon. Only then did the two of them turn their gazes to the young man sitting to the side. Shilin State was located in the northwest of Dechu State. Its customs were very different from Dechu State's. However, there was one interesting point. Shilin State called itself Deling, while Dechu State was called Dongchu. Dechu State, on the other hand, called itself Dechu State in Shilin. Just from the way they addressed each other, it could be seen that the relationship between the two countries was not harmonious. Crown Prince Shannon of Genin of Gojoseon was tall and straight. His facial features were deep and angular, as if they were carved by a knife. Yili could clearly see that his eyes were faintly dark purple. It was said that the Emperor of Shilin had brown eyes. This Crown Prince's appearance clearly showed that he was not a pure Shilin bloodline. Greetings, Crown Prince. Even the carefree Murong Ting still showed the proper etiquette in front of a foreign envoy. Crown Prince Shannan of Genin of Gojoseon sized up the two of them without any scruples. He quickly gave up on Murong Ting and completely turned his gaze to Yili. After a while, he said, "The king's consort has been appointed. Miss Murong, there is no need to be so polite. This one is Lei Tingfeng." Lei was the surname of Shiling. It was good that there was no language barrier. Minister Yi looked at the imposing Crown Prince Shannan of Genin of Gojoseon in front of him, then looked at Yili. He coughed lightly and said, "Leader, Crown Prince Shannan of Gojoseon specially came to give you a congratulatory gift." Chapter 78. Yili nodded and said, "Many thanks to the heir. I've troubled the heir to make this trip. I hope that the Dechu state can make the heir feel at home." Lei Tingfeng laughed loudly and said, "Of course, this little prince has admired the scenery of the Dechu state for a long time. I will definitely take a good look around. Come, bring out the gift this heir has prepared for the princess consort of Ding." Lightly clapping his hands, two men who looked like guards walked in. One of them was holding a long and narrow carved wooden box. Looking at the length and size of the box, Yili had a bad feeling. This gift probably wasn't a normal gift. Lei Tingfeng made a hand gesture, and the other man accepted the order and opened the wooden box. A burst of biting cold air greeted them. Minister Ye's face sank. He stood up and said in a deep voice, "Heir, what do you mean by this?" Lei Tingfeng raised his eyebrows and said in confusion, "This is the gift this little prince's father and uncle personally chose for the princess consort. Is there something wrong with it?" Minister Yi said, "My daughter's wedding is imminent. What do you mean by giving her a sword?" A sword was a lethal weapon. It was inauspicious. Inside the intricately carved wooden box was a long sword with an ancient appearance. Even though it was still in the scabbard, one could still feel the cold light and killing intent. This was clearly a peerless treasure sword that had been tempered by a sea of blood. "This is a gift that my country and my father specially found to show our sincerity. Or, does everyone here really not know the origin of this sword?" Lei Tingfeng carelessly crossed his arms and looked at the people in front of him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Hearing the contempt in his tone, Mo Jingli's brows wrinkled. He stood up and looked at the sword in the box. Mu Rongting's heart moved. She looked at Yili with some hesitation. "This is cloud grasping." After a long time, Mo Jingli said in a deep voice. Lei Tingfeng praised, "Li King has good eyes. That's right, this is the cloud grasping sword." Everyone was moved. This was not an ancient sword, but its reputation was definitely not inferior to any of the legendary swords. This sword had the same name as the first prince, Mo Lanyun. It was the weapon that Mo Lanyun used to conquer the world. It was also the sword of Prince Ding for generations to come. This sword had followed successive princes of the kingdom, establishing Prince to gallop through the battlefields unrivaled. No one knew how many people's blood it had drunk. Until 7 years ago, when the previous Prince Ding, Mo Showin, died of an illness at the border, this sword also disappeared without a trace. Countless people searched for it openly and secretly, but they could not find a trace of it. This gift was indeed of sufficient weight and sincerity. Lei Tingfeng clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Ever since I found out that the cloud-embracing sword was missing, I don't know how much effort father put into sending people everywhere to search for it. His hard work finally paid off. He found this sword in North D 1 year ago. Just in time for Prince Ding's wedding, I'll return it to you. What do you think of Princess Ding?" Minister Ye's face was a little dignified. He stood up and said to Lei Tingfeng, "I really have to thank you for such a generous gift." It was not an exaggeration to say that the cloud-embracing sword was the national treasure of Dechu State. Minister Yi did not even dare to refuse Lei Tingfeng's gift. Minister Yi could not help but secretly regret that he did not refuse the visit of Prince Ding of Genim of Gojoseon. Lei Tingfeng nodded with satisfaction. He raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "To tell you the truth, when I obtained such a treasure, I also wanted to take it for myself. However, this cloud-embracing sword seemed to have a spirit. I spent countless efforts and still could not pull it out. In the end, although I found a first-class swordsmith to pull out the sword, it was a pity that the sword did not listen to me at all. Even the #1 swordsman of West Hill could not control it. I thought that this cloud-embracing sword might only belong to the king's mansion. Therefore, I wanted to invite Princess Ding to test the sword. Minister Yi said unhappily, "My daughter does not know swordsmanship. Besides, if Prince Ding wants to test the sword, you should find Prince Ding." Lei Tingfeng looked at Yi Li and said with a smile, "Is Princess Ding not a member of the king's mansion? It is said that 100 years ago, the first Princess Ding had killed 16 enemies with this sword and saved Prince Ding's life. Since then, it has been passed down as a much-told story. It can be seen that this sword does not need the bloodline of the king's mansion. It can be matched with Prince Ding's partner. What do you think, Princess Ding?" Before Yi Li opened her mouth, Mo Jingli snorted and said, "Infanta Qing Yun is a peerless woman with both pen and sword. It is not surprising that she can use the cloud-embracing sword. Prince Genom of Gojoseon wants Yi Li to use the cloud-embracing sword. Are you deliberately making things difficult for my Dechu state? Who doesn't know that Yi Li can't even perform a complete set of swordsmanship?" Lei Tingfeng smiled. This prince believes in the judgment of the Ding King's household. Throughout the history of the Ding King's concubines, not a single one of them was not a stunning woman. Mo Jingli mocked. This generation is an exception. Muong Ting said unjustly, "Prince Shennan, you want a woman who has never practiced martial arts to perform with a sword that you can't even pull out? Does West Hill like to force people to do things? Is it forcing people to do things? Why don't you ask Princess Ding? Father ordered that this sword must be given to Princess Ding. Is it possible that I can only bring it back to West Hill?" This was already a threat. Lei Tingfeng's meaning was obvious. If the future Princess Ding couldn't pull out the cloud-embracing sword and couldn't control it, then don't blame him for bringing the sword back to West Hill. If that was the case, not to mention Great Chu's face, even its foundation would be lost. "Third sister, why don't you try? Maybe you can pull it out." Yi Ying said softly, "Prince Shennan of West Hill has given us such a valuable gift. If we don't accept it, won't we be rude to the neighboring country?" Minister Yi frowned and glanced at Yi Ying. He was thinking about whether Yi Li's refusal to pull out the sword or her inability to pull it out was more embarrassing. "Prince Ding has arrived." An announcement was made outside the door. Mo Xiaoyao appeared at the gate with Ah Jin. Everyone present secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Muong Ting secretly winked at Yi Li. Lei Tingfeng, who had been sitting in the chair casually, sat up straight the moment Mo Xiaoyao came in. His eyes swept over Mo Xiaoyao's calm and gentle face like a knife. Then he turned his head to look at Yi Li. Yi Li laughed in her heart. This prince was probably evaluating whether the cloud-embracing sword was more important in Mo Xiaoyao's heart or her, his fiancée. Why did Mo Xiaoyao come? Greetings to Prince Ding. I, Lei Tingfeng, have heard a lot about you. Lei Tingfeng stood up and smiled. Prince Ding is too polite. I had the honor of seeing Genin King of Gojoseon when I was young. We haven't seen each other for many years. I'm sure Prince's style is still the same. Mo Xiaoyao lightly nodded in return. Lei Tingfei's eyes twitched. He quickly smiled and said, "Father is in good health. He often talks to me about Prince's style in the past. He hopes that I can imitate him." Mo Xiaoyao's expression didn't change. He calmly said, "Prince is too kind. Now that I've seen Prince Ding, I know that Genin King of Gojoseon has a successor." Seeing the two men in front of her chatting warmly in this tense atmosphere, Yi Li inexplicably wanted to laugh. She didn't know who it was that said diplomacy was a very feminine activity. After the greetings, Mo Xiaoyao moved his wheelchair to Yi Li's side. He softly said, "Li is in a good mood." Yi Li lightly smiled and said, "Genin King of Gojoseon sent a very precious gift. It just so happens that Prince is also here. How about we share it?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled and nodded. His gaze fell on the embracing cloud sword in the box. His gaze was calm and without any ripples. It was as if there really was an ordinary sword in the box. He turned to Leitingfeng and said, "Your Majesty and Prince have troubled you. This sword has been lost for many years. I didn't expect to see it again today." Leitingfeng raised his eyebrows and said, "The embracing cloud sword is Dechu State's most precious treasure. It should be returned intact. I just don't know if I'll be able to see the glory of this famous sword." Chapter 79. Ah Jean. Ah Jean stepped forward and took the sword from the Westhill guard's hands. She carefully carried it to Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao took it with one hand. He raised his head and asked, "What do you think, Miss Li?" Yi Li lowered her head and reached out to touch the ancient scabbard. She nodded and said, "Although I don't know this, I know it is a good sword." Yi Li was indeed not familiar with the way of the sword. The only swords she had seen in her previous life were the taiji swords played by grandpas and grandmas in the park. On the modern battlefield, swords were not even used for cold weapons. Instead, short knives, daggers, and anime daggers were more suitable for close combat. Yi Li slowly grasped the sword hilt. She was not in a hurry to pull it out. If this sword was really as difficult to pull out and control as Leitingfeng had described, then the scabbard and the sword blade must have some kind of mechanism. Mo Xiaoyao smiled as he covered Yi Li's hand with his and raised the sword blade with his other hand. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Li acutely sensed Mo Xiaoyao's hand move slightly and then pull it out. A cold light flashed and the sword roared like a dragon. The entire hall seemed to freeze, but it was only for a moment. Yi Li quickly sensed the majestic fighting spirit and overwhelming killing intent from the sword blade. This was a dangerous aura that only those who had been on the battlefield could sense. Unknowingly, Mo Xiaoyao had already let go of her. Yi Li waved her sword to the side and the ancient painting on the wall not far away cracked. "Good sword." Yi Li sighed in admiration. She could cut the ancient painting with the sharpness of the sword blade. It was not an exaggeration to say that she could even cut a strand of hair. Holding the sword steadily, Yi Li calmly looked at Leitingfeng, who was staring at her. Before anyone could react, Mo Xiaoyao had already taken the cloud-embracing sword from Yi Li and sheathed it. Leitingfeng looked at the ancient painting on the wall that only had half of it left. After a long while, he let out a sigh and said, "It's indeed a good sword." As for whether Yi Li could control this sword or not, no one cared anymore, because she had already pulled out the incomparably sharp sword in her hand. Third young Mistress Yi did not have the strength to truss a chicken. It was enough for her to be able to hold the sword firmly. If she was forced to practice the sword, even the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon, who came with hostility, would be embarrassed to ask. Facing such a situation, Minister Yi stroked his beautiful beard with satisfaction, and his face was full of smiles. The daughter of the Yi family had helped Dechu State retrieve a long-lost treasure. Moreover, she had brought the cloud-embracing sword as her dowry. What a great honor that would be! Yi Li sighed in her heart. If this sword was placed in the Yi residence, the roof of the Yi family would be trampled flat. She didn't believe that Leitingfeng would just let go of such a precious gift without saying a word, and yet, she couldn't refuse to accept it. "Crown Prince, this sword?" Yi Li smiled faintly as she looked at the somewhat absent-minded Leitingfeng in front of her. Leitingfeng stared at the woman in front of him, and then looked at Mo Xiaoyao sitting next to her. He smiled and said, "This sword is naturally a congratulatory gift for the Crown Princess. This little prince also wishes the two of you 100 years of happiness and a long life together." Mo Xiaoyao said, "Then, I accept Crown Prince's auspicious words." Leitingfeng stood and said to everyone, "The gift has been delivered. This little prince will leave first. I will come and disturb Prince on the day of the wedding. Take care, I won't send you off." After sending off Genom of Gojoseon Crown Prince, Murong Ting stared at the cloud-embracing sword in Jin's hands. Her eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and she even forgot to pull on Yi Li's sleeve. Li. Cloud-embracing sword, It's really the cloud-embracing sword, can I touch it? Yi Li helplessly looked at her envious expression and turned to look at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao slightly raised his eyebrows, no matter. Since it's for you, it will naturally belong to Li Li in the future. Yi Li looked at him and said, I thought this was the crown prince's heirloom. Now it seemed like it wasn't that important. Murong Ting did not care about this. She cheered and rushed over to snatch the sword from Jin's hands. She held it in her hands and touched it left and right. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. After being passed down for so many years, of course it was an heirloom. If it could be passed down for another 1,000 years, it would not be worse than those heirlooms like Ganjiang and Moxie. Murong Ting lovingly caressed the sword and said, in fact, it is said that the cloud-embracing sword contains the crown prince's military books and treasures. Of course, this is not important. What is important is that this is the sword that every crown prince of the crown prince has used. To be able to touch it is really a great fortune. My father must be so envious of me. Yi Li raised her eyebrows. It turned out that chasing after idols was something that existed in every generation. Military books? Treasures? Is this sword really still intact? The West Hill should have taken it apart and examined it from the inside out. Mo Xiaoyao looked at the sword in Murong Ting's hands and a trace of warmth flashed through his eyes. He said indifferently, they have indeed seen it. The sword itself is not damaged. So? Murong Ting forgot who the person in front of her was. Her eyes widened as she waited for Mo Xiaoyao to reveal the mystery. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and smiled, so this is a sword. It is good that we can find it. After all, it is an item left behind by our ancestor. If we can't find it, we can just find a master swordsmith to forge another one. Then what about the military books? The treasures? Murong Ting asked in disappointment. Mo Xiaoyao looked at everyone indifferently. The cloud-embracing sword was forged when our ancestor was 16 years old. It cost all of our ancestors' savings. Where did the treasures and military books come from? Everyone was speechless. The people of the world only remembered that the cloud-embracing sword had followed Mo Lanyun his entire life. It was also the sword that every crown prince Ding carried with him. They guessed that there must be some secret behind it. However, they forgot that the cloud-embracing sword was forged by Mo Lanyun when he was young. At that time, Mo Lanyun was only a wild and unruly youth of an aristocratic family. Compared to the Prince Ding who helped his elder brother conquer the world 20 years later, he could not be mentioned in the same breath. Even Minister Yi, a scholar who did not know much about the cloud-embracing sword, could not help but be disappointed. If the cloud-embracing sword was so important, who would carry it with them? How could it be lost so easily? Li, I'm going back first. Can you send a few more people over? Yi Li nodded. She took the cloud-embracing sword from Murong Ting's hands and threw it to Jin. You should take the cloud-embracing sword back to the Ding King Palace. It's not convenient to leave it here. She had no interest in letting others step on her roof every day. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. That's good too. Seeing the cloud-embracing sword disappear outside the door, Murong Ting reluctantly withdrew her gaze. Mo Jingli stared at Yi Li suspiciously. You really believe that the cloud-embracing sword has no secrets? Yi Li naturally nodded. If I had military books and treasures, I wouldn't put them in a sword. As a commonly used sword that needed to be carried around, it was very famous and it was not a small sword. It was not a good thing to hide secrets. You vulgar people. That was Prince Ding's relic. Relic ah. Murong Ting resentfully despised the vulgar people in the hall. After Murong Ting despised the group of vulgar people, she held her hand that had touched Prince Ding's relic and admired herself. Minister Yi was in a happy mood as he greatly praised Yi Li. He could almost foresee what kind of reputation and glory it would bring to the Yi family when the news of Yi Li marrying the cloud-embracing sword was spread out. As for whether there were treasures or military books in the cloud-embracing sword, that was secondary. Minister Yi still had some self-awareness. Even if there were treasures, he would not have any part in it. In comparison, the reputation that did not need to pay any price at all was more meaningful. Chapter 80. Third sister is really fortunate. Prince Ding rushed over so quickly after hearing the news of Heir Genom of Gojoseon's visit. It can be seen that he has deep feelings for third sister. Yi Ying looked at Yi Li with her watery eyes and said faintly. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, fourth sister and Prince Li are also deeply in love, aren't they? Yi Ying quickly glanced at Imo Jingli and lowered her head with an aggrieved expression. Seeing this, Minister Yi frowned slightly. Could it be that was really wronged in Prince Li's residence? Thinking of this, Minister Yi casually looked at Imo Jingli and asked Yi Ying warmly, are you used to Prince Li's residence these days? Is doing well. Thank you for your concern, father. Yi Ying lowered her eyes and said softly. Minister Yi was relieved and smiled at Imo Jingli. Has been spoiled since she was young. If she has done anything wrong, Prince, please forgive her. Imo Jingli said, father-in-law, don't worry. I will take good care of That's good. Li will be getting married in a few days. This year our Yi family can be said to have double happiness. Minister Yi smiled with satisfaction. The three people present had different expressions. Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded, father is right. May 20th Yi Li was pulled up early before dawn. Although she always went to bed early and woke up early, looking at the dark night outside, Yi Li still felt a little helpless. The time to escort the bride was a little before noon, but she had to get up in the middle of the night to be manipulated. After taking a fragrant petal bath with the help of the maidservants, second aunt, first Madame of Duquoi's residence, Qin Zhang's mother, Madame Qin, and Aunt Yi who helped Yi Li prepare the dowry were already waiting in Qin Yi Pavilion with Murong Ting, Hua Tianxiang, Qin Zheng, and Qin Yuling. Hua Tianxiang walked in with a smile on her face holding a phoenix brocade wedding dress. The glittering phoenix brocade made her delicate face even more beautiful. Congratulations. Looking at Yi Li with a smile, Hua Tianxiang smiled silently. Yi Li smiled faintly and raised her hand like a puppet, allowing the few people to help her put on the wedding dress. Under the candlelight, the noble phoenix flowed with the light, faintly discernible among the delicate peonies. Against the bright red wedding dress, Yi Li's beautiful face, which was usually a little pale, had a little more joy. So beautiful, worthy of the phoenix brocade. Murmuring softly, everyone was a little stunned. Madame Hua looked at Madame Su, who was looking at Yi Li with a gratified smile, and had a deeper understanding of third Monsieur's position in the Su family. Patting her daughter who was in a daze, she said with a smile, well, stand aside if you want to admire. Don't disturb us. Without any explanation, she pulled Yi Li to sit in front of the bronze mirror and discussed what hairstyle to use with Madame Su and Madame Qin. Yi Li looked at the mirror speechlessly and let them do whatever they wanted. At the same time, she enjoyed the way Murong Ting pulled a few girls to the side and winked at her. By the time the madams, each with their own opinions, finally finished discussing the issue of hairstyles, the sky outside had already turned a little white. Yi Li couldn't help but look at the sky in her heart. She finally understood why they had to start preparing so early. If they started preparing at dawn, it was estimated that they wouldn't be ready by the time the bridegroom came. After tidying up the hair, a few maids had cleverly brought several sets of head ornaments and jewelry that had been prepared before. Madame Hua wasn't in a hurry to put the hairpin on Yi Li's head. She smiled and instructed the maidservant, quickly go and get some food for your young miss to fill her stomach. After the makeup is done, she won't be able to eat anything today. Qing Shuang made a face and smiled as she pulled Qing Yu to prepare the food. The madams also went outside to rest for a while. As soon as the adults left, the rest of the children immediately surrounded Yi Li. How is it, Yi Li? Are you nervous? Murong Ting leaned on the table and asked curiously with her chin in her hand. Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled, you don't know if I'm nervous or not. In the future, I'll see if you're nervous or not. Murong Ting's face turned red. She gritted her teeth and said, I won't be nervous. Hua Tianxiang looked at her with a smile. You're stuttering. How dare you say you're not nervous? You're definitely more nervous than Yili. Ah, the next one is Zheng Er. Zheng Er needs to be prepared. Qin Jing glared at Hua Tianxiang angrily. She whispered with a red face, why are you talking about me? Qin Zheng's shy appearance made Yili reach out and pinch her little face. She smiled and said, what Tianxiang said makes sense, future cousin-in-law. You. Li, you're getting married today. Why are you? Qin Zheng looked helplessly at her good sisters who were laughing together and Qin Yuling who was hiding on the side and laughing secretly. The person who should be shy didn't express anything. Instead, she, who had nothing to do with it, was shy and embarrassed. Hua Tianxiang wiped her tears and said with a smile, good Zheng Er, don't be angry. She's a strange person. Don't expect her to be shy. Looking back at Yili, Hua Tianxiang nodded with satisfaction and said, our Li is really a great beauty. Yili only felt black lines on her forehead. You're not trying to say that clothes make the person, are you? How can that be? It's just that you usually don't pay attention to your appearance. Look at you now. Even without jewelry or decorations, you're still shining. Hee. Prince Ding will definitely be stunned. Yili shrugged and didn't say anything. If Imo Xiaoyao didn't like a beauty like noble consort Lu, it was hard to imagine what kind of beauty he would be stunned by. Qing Shuang and the others brought in some light breakfast. After eating and resting for a while, the madams came in again to choose accessories and makeup. Because they couldn't try on the wedding dress and couldn't have a second one, even the accessories, hairstyle, and makeup could only be decided according to the effect of the wedding dress after putting on the dress. So, they prepared 3 sets of jewelry in advance. In the end, the madams unanimously chose a set of golden silk peonies with tassels inlaid with rubies and a few jeweled gold hairpins. Then they drew their eyebrows and put on some light rouge. Madame Qin ingeniously drew a small half-open peony between her eyebrows. Yili was a bit lost in thought as she looked at the beautiful woman in the bronze mirror. For a moment, she almost didn't recognize herself. Her beautiful black hair was tied into an elegant bun. The tassels inlaid with gemstones swayed gently under the candlelight, adding a charm to the dignified and noble red wedding dress. Yili smiled faintly in her heart. She had never thought that the words charming and delicate would be related to her. So beautiful. Li, you're also stunned, aren't you? Hua Tianxiang teased. Yili glared at her. Madame Hua had already pushed the girls out with a smile. All right, everyone go out first. Let the bride rest for a while, the bridegroom should be here soon. The crowd once again congratulated Yili before leaving happily. Only Madame Su was left behind. When Madame Su handed her a thin booklet with a smile on her face and instructed her to read it carefully, Yili could only stare at the booklet in front of her in a daze. She didn't need to think to know what was inside. After thinking about it, Yili stood up and put the booklet in a box that she didn't use much. Chapter 81. King Ding's mansion was obviously much more reliable than King Li's mansion. Qing Yishuan was bustling with noise and excitement when it was only 8:45. Madame Hua and Madame Qin personally covered Yi Li's head with a phoenix brocade veil and helped her to pay her respects to old Madame Yi, Minister Yi, and Madame Su's memorial tablets. In this wedding, the most eye-catching thing was naturally the groom, who was originally expected to appear, but absolutely unexpected. A long time ago, many people had secretly guessed who the king's mansion would invite to escort the bride, but no one thought that Prince Ding would come in person. The road from the gate of Ye's mansion to King Ding's mansion was already full of people in the capital who came to watch the fun. Seeing Prince Ding, who was dressed in red, appearing in front of everyone, the commoners couldn't help but recall the young man dressed in embroidered clothes who had galloped on his horse and brandished his whip. They sighed in their hearts. Similarly, the extravagance of Ye's mansion was also extraordinary. Originally, Yi Rong, the only son of the Yi family, should send his sister out, but it was completely different from when Yi Ying got married. Outside the gate of Ye's mansion, 6 handsome and extraordinary men with different characteristics appeared. The leaders were naturally Su Qingchen and Su Qingze, followed by Su Qingfeng and Su Qingbai, and finally Su Qingyan and Yi Rong. The young masters of the Su family were either gentle and elegant, cold and dignified, valiant, or handsome. Even the youngest, Su Qingyan, was smart and candid. Yi Rong was immediately ignored by everyone. She could only follow Su Qingyan silently. The bride walked out of the gate with the help of Hua Tianxiang and Qin Zheng. The phoenix brocade wedding dress shone brightly in the sun and attracted people's amazement again. This day was undoubtedly the busiest day in the capital. It was unknown whether it was because of the status of King Ding's mansion or because the guests who came to attend this wedding were too special. Even the emperor brought the empress and empress dowager to attend the wedding in person. They attended the wedding instead of presiding over the wedding, because the one presiding over the wedding this time was Great Elder Princess Shifu, who even the emperor had to respectfully address as Great Elder Princess. King Ding's mansion, which had not had any guests for 7 or 8 years, was full of guests. Great Elder Princess sat high on the throne and chatted with the guests who came to congratulate her. Mo Jingqi and the Empress sat beside Great Elder Princess and talked with her. Although Great Elder Princess had not been involved in worldly affairs for more than 20 years, her dignity as the iron-fisted princess, who was respected by the former emperor, was still not to be trifled with. Your Majesty, Great Elder Princess, the auspicious time has arrived. The chief steward of the Wang mansion came in to report, and all the guests in the hall fell silent. Mo Jingqi looked at the gray-haired Great Elder Princess who was still in high spirits and said with a smile, "In that case, salute me." Imperial Grandaunt? Shifu Great Elder Princess nodded. She stood up and said to everyone, "Your Majesty, Empress Dowager, and all the guests, please come with I to watch the ceremony." The auditorium located in the main hall of the prince's mansion had already been properly decorated. Red candles burned high, creating a joyous atmosphere. Great Elder Princess sat high on the main seat, with the Emperor and Empress Dowager sitting on her left and right sides. The rest of the guests were seated according to their respective statuses. Under everyone's gaze, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili walked into the auditorium surrounded by bridesmaids. They were supposed to be a match made in heaven, but the groom could only sit in a wheelchair, which made many people feel sorry. At the same time, there were even more people who were sighing. If Prince Ding was not in his current state, he would have already married a talented and beautiful woman as his wife. Why would he only marry an unknown daughter from the minister's residence? Prince Ding's legs are inconvenient. Don't you lack sincerity by saluting like this? A joking voice suddenly sounded in the hall, as if a basin of ice water was suddenly poured into a blazing fire. The whole wedding hall suddenly fell silent. Everyone looked at the source of the voice in surprise. Sitting there were the envoys of various countries who came to watch the ceremony. Among them, a strong young man was staring at Mo Xiaoyao with a complacent face. Obviously, the words just now came from his mouth. He clearly did not feel that he was rude. When he saw everyone's gaze converging on him, he became even more presumptuous. That is the 11th prince of the northern tribes. I heard that he is an idiot. Why would the king of the northern tribes send him to the Chu state? Yi Li stood quietly beside Mo Xiaoyao, hearing the guests' whispers. Have you forgotten that the northern tribes and King Ding's manor can be said to have a deep hatred as deep as the sea? Even though they have reconciled with our great Chu these few years, I'm afraid that they still hold a grudge over the past and purposely sent this idiot here to embarrass King Ding. How can the emperor allow such a person to attend the ceremony? He is the envoy of a country. He came from so far away, how can we not let him attend the ceremony? Amidst the discussions, Mo Jingqi looked down and said to the prince of the northern tribes in a clear voice, 11th prince, our Dechu state's wedding does not have a kneeling ceremony, so there is nothing inconvenient for Prince Ding. However, the prince of the northern tribes clearly did not intend to name the emperor of Dechu state. He furrowed his thick brows and said unhappily in a loud voice, I have heard of the reputation of the Dechu state's Prince Ding when I was in the northern tribes. Who would have thought that I would see a cripple in a wheelchair today? Is the Dechu state's emperor trying to fool us? When these words came out, not only Emo Jingqi, but all the officials of the Dechu state present changed their expressions. Sitting beside the prince of the northern tribes, Lei Tingfeng, the crown prince of Shiling Genom of Guozhouzian, coughed lightly and said with a smile, 11th prince, this is indeed the Dechu state's Prince Ding. However, Prince Ding met with an accident 7 years ago. Today, we are here to attend the ceremony, not to make a scene. Come, let this prince toast you. The northern tribes were barbarians, and this 11th prince was considered a hooligan among them. How could he give up just because Lei Tingfeng urged him to drink? He glanced at Emo Xiaoyao and chuckled. I remember now. Prince Ding's injury seems to have been caused by our northern tribe's winged cavalry general. In the past, I always heard the winged cavalry general lamenting to I that he was so close to being captured. Enough! Princess Shifu was so angry that her face had turned black. She no longer cared that the prince of the northern tribes was an envoy from another country. She said coldly, if the prince of the northern tribes is here to attend the ceremony, then sit quietly. If not, get out. The prince of the northern tribes was stunned. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something to great elder princess. But he was quickly pressed back by the two people beside him. Although the prince of the northern tribes was displeased, he didn't say anything in the end. Others saw great elder princess's angry face and didn't dare to say anything. Emo Jingqi coughed softly and said, Princess, it's time to salute. Princess Shifu's eyes darkened and she nodded to the official who was in charge of the ceremony. First, bow to heaven and earth. Second, bow to your parents. Husband and wife, bow to each other. Under the red bridal veil, Yili slightly turned her eyes and saw the person beside her holding the red silk tightly. She could only sigh in her heart. In fact, since she knew Emo Xiaoyao until now, she always felt that Emo Xiaoyao was too perfect to be real. As a person who was crippled, disfigured, and said to be in poor health, his performance was too perfect. He didn't feel inferior, nor did he feel sorry for himself, nor did he give up on himself. No matter when he stood up, even if he was sitting in a wheelchair, he seemed to be taller than anyone else. Thinking back to the rumor about the fiery young man, Emo Xiaoyao was even more illusory and ethereal. What kind of painful tempering did he have to go through from being as fiery as fire to being as gentle as jade? Until now, Yili really felt a trace of Emo Xiaoyao's emotions, anger and murderous intent. Chapter 82. Yili smiled bitterly. It was her wedding, but she could feel her husband's negative emotions in the hall. Even if it wasn't directed at her, it still made her feel a little depressed. The ceremony is complete. Send them to the bridal chamber. In the festive red bridal chamber, the dragon and phoenix candles burned quietly. Yili sat quietly on the new bed that was embroidered with dragons and phoenixes, speechless. She knew that Emo Xiaoyao was sitting not far from the bed and looking at her, but he didn't seem to have any intention of coming forward. Can I take this off? She couldn't wait for the groom to do it, so she could only ask herself. After a while, Emo Xiaoyao slowly walked forward. His eyes lit up as the veil on her head was removed. The two of them were stunned when they saw each other. Yili was used to Emo Xiaoyao's plain clothes, so she wasn't used to seeing him in a bright red robe. But, this man didn't seem to be ugly no matter what color he wore. Emo Xiaoyao was only dazed for a moment. A trace of surprise flashed through his calm eyes, but it immediately disappeared without a trace. The two of them looked at each other in silence for a moment, feeling a little restrained. Yili leaned forward and pulled Emo Xiaoyao's left hand. Emo Xiaoyao was stunned and immediately wanted to pull back his clenched fist. Let go. Yili said lightly. His fingers gradually loosened. His broad hand didn't look like a pampered noble's. There were many calluses and scars on it, but it didn't look hideous. Yili remembered that one of her childhood friends had once told her what a man's hand should look like. There should be some calluses, which meant that this man wasn't someone who didn't do any household chores. There might even be one or two unsightly scars, which meant that this man wasn't someone who was raised in a boudoir. It would be best if it looked good. Only this kind of hand could make a woman feel safe and pleasing to the eye. At this moment, the palm of his hand was stained with a shocking scarlet. For deep wounds were still slowly bleeding, but the man opposite her seemed to feel no pain at all. He opened his hand and allowed her to see. Yili lowered her head to look at his scarred palm. She reached out a finger and gently touched it. Then, she pressed down hard. She raised her head and looked at the man whose expression did not change at all. "Doesn't it hurt?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. He looked at Yili with a warm gaze. "What kind of pain is this?" "I've been through worse." Yili agreed. For someone who had been on the battlefield, this kind of injury was nothing. She stood up and walked to the side, rummaging through her dowry to find a familiar small box and carried it back. She sat by the bed and opened the box. She took out clean white cotton gauze and medicine and applied it on him. "Even if you're angry, you don't have to hurt yourself, right? I thought you were used to it." Mo Xiaoyao smiled bitterly. "You saw it. I'm not used to it yet." He also thought that he was used to it. In reality, he had used 7 whole years to get used to it. He was used to not being able to ride a horse and gallop on the battlefield. He was used to having to wear a mask in front of others. Otherwise, the scars on his face would attract fearful and sympathetic gazes. He was used to being seriously ill from time to time. His life in the past was like a dream. He always thought that he was used to it well. But today, standing in the hall and listening to the prince of the northern tribes humiliate him, he realized that he was still far from it. So today, not only did he humiliate himself, he also humiliated his new wife, even though his wife did not blame him. Yili clearly saw the guilt in the man's eyes and couldn't help but smile faintly. "I thought you knew that we would accept this marriage and I had already made preparations." Mo Xiaoyao asked, "You knew that this would happen?" Yili shook her head and smiled. "Even if this didn't happen, there would be other situations. Do you think I can expect to live a peaceful and happy life after getting married? Even a normal family would have its own problems, let alone a noble family like this." Mo Xiaoyao looked at her quietly. After a long time, he said softly, "Maybe I can't guarantee that you will live a carefree life. But as long as it's me, I will do my best to give you the life you want." Yili raised her eyebrows. "I believe you." After applying the medicine, Yili put it away and smiled. "You've been tired. You should rest early." Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yili and said. Yili was stunned, but soon smiled again. "Okay, you should also rest early." Mo Xiaoyao nodded and asked Jin to push him away. He thoughtfully asked Qing Shuang and others who were waiting outside to serve him. When Qing Shuang and others came in, Yili had taken off her jewelry and put it in the jewelry box on the dressing table. Qing Shuang frowned and said with some dissatisfaction, "Miss, why did Prince leave?" Princess Sifu Great Elder Princess said on the spot that Prince Ding was not allowed to disturb the bridal chamber and did not need Prince Ding to drink with the guests. So now Prince Ding should be in the bridal chamber with Mississippi. Why did he come and leave? Yili looked back and said with a smile, "This is the Prince Ding mansion. Are you afraid that he has no place to rest?" Qing Luan and Qing Yu prepared warm water and asked Yili to take a bath. Their expressions were not very good. Yili did not have time to care about whether the maid's expressions were good or not. In fact, in her opinion, Mo Xiaoyao's decision was too considerate. Although she did not intend to be his wife in name for the rest of her life, she was really worried about whether she could adapt to do something with a man she was not familiar with and had only met a few times. At this point, she felt that she should admire the adaptability of ancient women. Usually, she could not even hold hands with a man. When it came to marriage, she had to roll in the sheets with a man she had never met. Taking off the heavy jewelry and gorgeous wedding dress, Yili relaxed her body with satisfaction and prepared to take a bath and rest. Until she lay on the soft and comfortable bed and fell asleep, there was still a faint smile on her lips. "Mother, grandfather, father, mother, and a large group of cousins. I married myself, somewhere in the study room of the Ding King mansion. Mo Xiaoyao, who had already changed into plain clothes, sat behind the desk with a rarely seen gloomy and cold expression. Feng Zhiyao, who was dressed in red, lazily leaned against the door and said with a smile, "Why are you showing such an expression on the day of your wedding? Aren't you afraid of scaring sister-in-law?" In the corner of the room sat a hedonistic youth. He looked at him with a smile and said, "In my opinion, sister-in-law's courage is much bigger than what we imagined." Feng Zhiyao thought for a while and nodded in agreement. "That's right. I really haven't seen many women with the guts of third Miss Yi. Have you said enough?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his head and looked coldly at the two people who were not serious. Feng Zhiyao shrugged his shoulders and said, "Tonight, that idiot is the 11th prince of the northern tribes, Yelu Ping. He is the son of the king of the northern tribes' most beloved concubine Xiao and the younger brother of the 7th prince of the northern tribes, Yelu Yi. He is also the nephew of the northern tribes' winged cavalry great general, Helian Zhen. You can't have forgotten what you did to Helian Zhen 7 years ago, right? Helian Zhen's surname is Helian and concubine Zhao's surname is Xiao. How can Yelu Ping be Helian Zhen's nephew?" the hedonistic youth asked in confusion. Chapter 83. The relationship between the northern tribes is so messy that it gives people a headache. Who knows how they got involved? Feng Zhiyao said unhappily, "Ling Haoyu, shouldn't this be your problem?" The young man was the second son of the northern general, Ling Haoyu, who was said to be the most disappointing person in the capital. "I received news from the northern tribes that Yelu Yi is Helian Zhen's illegitimate son. Can this kind of news that has already spread to the Chu state be trusted?" Feng Zhiyao rolled his eyes and looked back at Mo Xiaoyao. 7 years ago, your eldest brother suddenly died of illness. Originally, Helian Zhen could have taken the opportunity to establish unparalleled achievements and even sweep through the Chu state. In the end, because you killed your way out of Ghost Sorrow Valley, a fire almost burned half of Helian Zhen's life. Not only did Helian Zhen lose soldiers, but the northern tribes also didn't dare to send troops for 3 whole years. By the time they recover, our great Chu will have recovered as well. From then on, Helian Zhen fell out of favor with the king of the northern tribes. This also caused Yelu Yi and concubine Zhao's influence in the northern tribes to be greatly reduced. It's already good that they didn't directly rush to the Chu state to fight with you. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "In other words, Yelu Ping was sent by Yelu Yi to embarrass I?" Feng Zhiyao rubbed his chin and said, "Everyone knows that Yelu Ping is a hooligan. He offended you and you were too embarrassed to argue with him. Isn't the result obvious?" Mo Xiaoyao sneered, "Today, they are still considered polite. Only Yelu Ping jumped out to cause trouble. The others are also impatient, right?" Feng Zhiyao knocked his forehead and thought for a while, who knew that our emperor would bring the empress and empress dowager to Ding King's estate? It's not good to be too rude in front of his majesty, right? Since a fool has already stepped out, those who claim to be smart naturally won't speak anymore. However, the envoys from each country will stay in the capital for half a month. As for sister-in-law, don't disturb her," Mo Xiaoyao said calmly. Feng Zhiyao and Ling Haoyu looked at each other. Ling Haoyu blinked his peach blossom eyes and asked, "Prince, don't tell us that the new princess you married is planning to hide her in the Prince Ding mansion and not let anyone see her? Could it be that the third miss of the Yi family was so charming that His Highness Prince Ding fell in love with her at first sight and wanted to carefully hide and protect her when they met again?" Mo Xiaoyao said, "Miss Li doesn't like to socialize with the rich and powerful. If there's nothing important, don't bother her." Feng Zhiyao tapped the folding fan in his hand and frowned. "Ah Yao, even if an ordinary family marries a wife, they have to take charge of the inner court and make connections. Moreover, she was the mistress of the Ding Palace. If she was a lady from a respectable family without any ability, then so be it. However, third young Mistress Yi was not a weak and incompetent woman. If she can help you, it will naturally be twice the result with half the effort. You will also be able to relax a lot. Feng San is right. Ting praises third young mistress Yi a lot. Leng Haoyu agreed. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, we'll talk about this later. Feng Zhiyao raised his eyebrows slightly. It was unknown what he thought of, but he suddenly smiled and said, all right, since you've already decided, we won't bother about this matter. What does the emperor mean by personally bringing the Empress Dowager over today? Is he still guarding against you? Mo Xiaoyao said, when did he not guard against me? Now, the cloud-embracing sword has returned to the Ding Palace. In the past few days, there have been at least a dozen groups of people trying to break into the Ding Palace. At least 3 of them came from the palace. Leng Haoyu's eyes lit up. Are they His Majesty's people? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. I'm not sure, but there are definitely some of his people. Feng Zhiyao looked at Leng Haoyu with a smile and said, Leng Heir, go back and keep an eye on your family's cold-faced general. If His Majesty keeps failing to break into the palace, he will most likely send you over. Who told him to be His Majesty's most trusted aide who grew up with him since he was young? Leng Haoyu curled his lips and said, don't worry. No matter who comes, they won't be able to bring a single strand of hair out of this palace. Thinking of his cold-faced big brother, Leng Haoyu, he was filled with displeasure. He was a self-righteous fool who only knew how to follow the emperor. But every time Ting saw him, she would have an expression of admiration. When she saw him, it was as if she was looking at trash. He was really unhappy. That guy better come and break into the palace. If he was caught and beaten up, Ting would know who was the heroic and extraordinary one, and who was the hedonistic fool. Prince, someone broke into the palace. The heavy stone door opened a crack and Jean quickly rushed in. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes turned cold. Where did they go? Wang Fei's courtyard. Pa! Don't let a single one go. Since today's wedding is not suitable to see blood, then we'll entertain them tomorrow. Early in the morning, Yi Li leisurely sat in front of the bronze mirror. Qing Shuang and Qing Xia helped her take care of her hair. Qing Shuang deftly tied her black hair into a lily bun. Qing Xia held out a jewelry box filled with jewels for Yi Li to choose. Yi Li helplessly looked left and right in front of the bronze mirror. She frowned and looked at Qing Shuang. Can't you have a simpler one? Qing Shuang snickered, young miss, you should be content. A newly married woman should dress up well. Qing Shuang has already chosen the simplest hairstyle. If it was the hairstyle popular among the noble ladies in the capital, you wouldn't be able to stand it. In the past, those hairstyles were for young ladies. Now that you're married, you can't use them anymore. Let's use the set of jewelry that Prince gave young miss before. Young miss hasn't used it yet. Yi Li nodded. She did like that set of green magnolia jewelry very much. It didn't look too ostentatious. Qing Xia pressed her lips together with a smile. She took Yi Li's jewelry and helped Yi Li put it on. She nodded and praised, Qing Shuang understands young miss the best. What young miss? Lin Mama and Wei Mama came in. Lin Mama glared at the servant girls and said, from now on, you have to call her Wang Fei. Don't let the people in this fu think that the Wang Fei's servants don't know the rules. Yes, Mama. The 4 maidservants greet the princess. The 4 maidservants stood in a row and respectfully bowed to Yi Li. Wei Mama's heart ached for Yi Li as she asked in a soft voice. The 2 Mama naturally knew that Prince hadn't rested in the bridal chamber last night. Wei Mama couldn't help but feel sorry for the young miss that she had taken care of since she was young. Yi Li smiled and comforted the 2 Mama. The 2 Mama saw that Yi Li's face didn't have any expression of being wronged and dropped the matter. They thought that young miss had just arrived at the Ding King's fu and was not used to it yet. Prince was considerate, so he gave young miss some time to adapt. But they still hinted to Yi Li that it was best for her to become a real husband and wife with Prince as soon as possible. After all, they were people who would spend a lifetime together. Yi Li's mouth couldn't help but twitch. In the end, she didn't say anything and let them misunderstand. Prince is here. Mo Xiaoyao appeared outside the door and asked softly, Yi Li, may I come in? Yi Li responded. Mo Xiaoyao then left a Jing outside the door and slid his wheelchair in. Looking at Yi Li, he asked, "Yi Li, did you sleep well last night?" Yi Li nodded with a smile, "Very well. Your complexion doesn't look too good." When Mo Xiaoyao came in, Lin Mama led the servant girls out. Yi Li regained her senses and found that there was no one to serve tea. She could only helplessly smile at Mo Xiaoyao as she walked to the table and sat down. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes did indeed have some tiredness as he waved his hand. "Last night I sent some guests to rest a little late. It's not a problem." Chapter 84. Should we greet Great Elder Princess first? And eldest sister-in-law. Mo Xiaoyao was the only direct descendant in Prince Sting's mansion, but there were other people. The late Prince Sting, who was also Mo Xiaoyao's elder brother, Mo Xiaowen's first wife, was still alive. However, it was said that she had been staying in the temple all year round for her husband's sake. She didn't even appear at the wedding yesterday. One of the concubines of Mo Xiaoyao's father, Mo Lufang, was also alive. In addition, Yi Li didn't ask how many concubines Mo Xiaoyao had. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "Let's have breakfast first. Great Elder Princess is old and tired yesterday, so she won't get up so early." As for eldest sister-in-law, Mo Xiaoyao frowned slightly and said, "Since eldest brother passed away, eldest sister-in-law has been living in the Buddha Hall with several concubines. Even I rarely see her. A few days ago, she sent someone to tell you that you can visit her when you come back." Yi Li nodded. She had heard about the former Princess Ding from her third brother. She was also a pitiful person. Princess Wen wasn't born in a rich and powerful family, but in an ordinary scholarly family. She married Mo Xiaowen when she was 16 and lost her husband when she was 18. Mo Xiaowen was away on an expedition when they just got married, so they didn't even have a child. "Then, what do I need to do?" Yi Li asked. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and said with a faint smile, "Besides managing the affairs in the mansion, you also need to keep some accounts. You can do whatever you like at other times. If you feel bored, you can invite your friends to visit the mansion or go out for a walk. Li, this will be your home in the future, so you don't have to be so restrained." Yi Li nodded and said, "I know, but I'm not used to it. So now, let's have breakfast first. Then I'll bring you to meet the people in the mansion." Breakfast was served in Yi Li's courtyard. The breakfast served in the Prince Sting mansion was also to Yi Li's liking. After breakfast, the head steward came in to report, "Prince, the stewards are all here. I await the summons of the prince and princess consort." Mo Xiaoyao nodded and turned around to say to Yi Li, "This is the butler of the Prince Sting mansion, Mo Xian. He's also Ah Jin's uncle. If you need anything in the future, just tell him directly." The steward also stepped forward and bowed, "This old servant greets the princess." Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "You don't have to be so courteous. I'll have to trouble you in the future." It could be seen that Mo Xiaoyao valued this steward a lot, and he was also Ah Jin's uncle. Ah Jin was always by Mo Xiaoyao's side, and could definitely be considered a trusted aide. Receiving such courteous treatment from the princess, Steward Mo wasn't shocked, but he wasn't arrogant. He still respectfully returned the greeting, "This old servant doesn't dare. If the princess has any orders in the future, just tell this old servant." When the procession came to the flower hall, there were already many people standing there. Seeing Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao come in, they instantly stood up and bowed in unison, "Greetings to the prince, greetings to the princess." Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li into the flower hall. He pointed at the main seat for her to sit before turning back to say, "Rise. This is the newly married princess. In the future, princess consort's words are I's thoughts. Does everyone understand? We will follow princess consort's orders." "Very good. Li, this is Sun Mama. She's the steward of the Wang Fu. She's in charge of all matters in the Fu. If you have anything you don't understand, you can ask her." The mama standing at the very front was Sun Mama, who had come to the Yi Fu to deliver gifts. She was also the first person that Mo Xiaoyao had introduced to Yili. Thinking, Mo Xiaoyao added, Sun Mama used to be one of Mufei's people. This old servant greets princess consort. Sun Mama greets princess consort. Yili nodded. This is the external steward of the Wang Fu, Yang Ling. He's in charge of all external interactions. Standing next to Sun Mama was a middle-aged man in his 40s. His eyes were slightly bright. One could see that he was a very scheming person. Yang Ling greets princess consort. Yili frowned slightly. She didn't have any opinion on how other people addressed themselves. But it was often possible to see a person's attitude towards you from how they addressed themselves. This external steward clearly didn't have as much respect for Yili as Steward Mo and Sun Mama did for Yili. Steward Yang doesn't need to be so courteous. Then Mo Xiaoyao introduced to Yili several stewards who were in charge of the various businesses in the Wang Fu, as well as several more important stewards. Yili also had people send greeting gifts for these stewards and rewards for the servants in the Fu. Sun Mama and Steward Mo's admiration for this new princess consort grew stronger. Although the Yi family wasn't very proper, it was clear that the new princess consort had inherited Madame Ye's excellent bloodline. She knew when to advance and when to retreat. Even the gifts given to the stewards and the rewards given to the servants were carefully arranged and very appropriate. Princess consort. Jean appeared at the door. Looking at the people in the flower pavilion, he hesitated before speaking. Jean, what is it? Mo Xiaoyao asked. Jean held a long box in his hands and said, someone just sent this over, saying it's a wedding gift for princess consort. Yili raised an eyebrow. Where is the person? Gone. The two exchanged a look. Mo Xiaoyao then said to Jean, bring it over. Mo Xiaoyao took it in his hands and looked. When he opened the box, there was only a scroll painting inside. Seeing that there was no problem, he handed it to Yili. Yili lowered her head to unfold the painting and couldn't help but gasp in surprise. This was a painting of a beautiful woman. Those who had never seen the painting would find it hard to imagine that there was such a beauty in the world. Her willowy eyebrows were dark without any makeup, her cherry lips were vermilion without any painting. Her exquisite and refined features were described with any compliments that made people feel like they had tarnished her. Even in the painting, one could still feel the clear water in the eyes of the young girl in the painting. The young girl in the painting was dressed in plain clothing, her hands holding a zither as she smiled amidst the flowers. Even the flowers seemed to lose their color. Bright as the sun rising at dawn, as bright as the lotus blooming, such a great beauty. Yili sighed softly. Her gaze moved to the side of the painting. On it was written, Beauty of the Chu capital. The inscription was Han Mingyue. Mo Xiaoyao also stilled. Looking at the beautiful woman in the painting, his eyes moved slightly. He quickly turned his gaze to Yili. Yili was silent for a moment. She raised her head and smiled at Mo Xiaoyao. Han Mingyue's beauty is said to be worth thousands of gold. But to send such a painting to me on the second day of the wedding, I feel ashamed. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. He looked at her and said, You are very good. Yili looked at the woman in the painting one last time. She rolled up the painting and said with some difficulty, This? Although the painting was very beautiful and very valuable, keeping it by her side was not a good idea. Even if she wasn't jealous, she didn't feel that she should keep the painting of her husband's ex-fiancé. Mo Xiaoyao said, It's for you. Yili can deal with it herself. Yili raised her eyebrows. Did he think that she would force him to deal with the painting of his ex-fiancé? She only wanted to ask him if he wanted it. If he wanted it, she would give it to him. I don't have much interest in painting. Moreover, looking at a woman who is prettier than me every day is a blow to me. Mo Xiaoyao thought for a moment. He said to Nurse Sun, Change the box and bring this painting to old Sue's residence. Chapter 85. Nanny Sun said respectfully, Yes, Your Highness. She stepped forward to take over the painting in Yi Li's hand and turned around to hand it to the maid beside her to prepare. Mo Xiaoyao tilted his head and said to Yi Li with a smile, "Let's go. Great Elder Princess should get up." Yi Li nodded, got up and held Mo Xiaoyao's hand to leave with him. She didn't see the gratified look on Nanny Sun's and Director Mo's faces behind her. "Who do you think sent that painting to her?" Yi Li asked curiously as they walked to the courtyard where Great Elder Princess lived temporarily. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "That painting was originally kept in the mansion. I wanted to give it to Elder Su. But there were too many things to deal with at that time. When I came back, I didn't know where it was." Yi Li said with a smile, "Han Mingyue's painting is priceless. Didn't you send someone to look for it? What's more, it's a real beauty. No wonder Han Mingyue dared to paint Chu Jing as a beauty." Mo Xiaoyao looked up at her and said after thinking for a moment, "If you must paint, my painting is not worse than Han Mingyue's. Or I can paint one for you when I'm free." Yi Li was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but smile. "Okay, thank you very much." Great Elder Princess had got up. As soon as they reached the door, the maid beside Great Elder Princess invited them in. Great Elder Princess was sitting on the couch and drinking tea. When she saw them come in, she immediately smiled and waved to Mo Xiaoyao, "Xiaoyao, come here and let me have a look at you. And Xiaoyao's wife, come here, come here." Mo Xiaoyao took Yi Li forward and saluted. "Imperial Aunt." Great Elder Princess pulled Yi Li to sit beside her. After looking at her carefully, she nodded with satisfaction and said, "Good, good, good. You are a good daughter-in-law of King Ding's mansion. I like you very much. The Emperor finally did a good thing this time. Xiaoyao should live a good life with Li Er. I won't teach you a lesson if you dare to mess around and make Li Er angry." Mo Xiaoyao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said with a wry smile, "Imperial Aunt." Yi Li gloated at his rare embarrassment. She covered her mouth and snickered. Great Elder Princess held Yi Li's hand affectionately and said, "Li, you don't know how naughty he was when he was a child. If he wasn't obedient for a day, he would go up the roof and tear down the tiles. His lord father was so angry that he almost fainted. She had become much more mature in the past few years. She had grown up and become more sensible. You two have a good life together. If you have any grievances, feel free to look for I will help you." Great Elder Princess was surprisingly easy to get along with. Perhaps because she was old and liked children, Great Elder Princess didn't look like the legendary iron-fisted princess at all. Instead, she was more like an amiable grandmother than Madame Dowager of the Yi family. Yi Li smiled and said, "Thank you, Imperial Aunt. Xiaoyao won't bully me." Hearing Yi Li's address, Great Elder Princess's eyes lit up and she was obviously happier. She held Yi Li's hand and talked about Mo Xiaoyao's embarrassing childhood. Mo Xiaoyao sat there with the corners of his mouth twitching, which was rare. He didn't know whether to stop her or leave. He could only sit there and listen to Great Elder Princess talking about his childhood and accept Yi Li's strange and teasing gaze. Great Elder Princess obviously didn't care about Mo Xiaoyao's feelings or Yi Li's feelings. She even directly talked about Mo Xiaoyao's childhood sweetheart, Su Yudi. Yi Li felt a little embarrassed, but seeing that Mo Xiaoyao didn't mean to stop Great Elder Princess, she had to listen for the time being. Great Elder Princess didn't seem to see the expressions of the two young people in front of her. She held Yi Li's hand and said to Mo Xiaoyao with a smile, "I have said that the girl of the Su family is not suitable for you. Now look at Li Er. You have to admit that I have a better taste than you. Don't you think so? Imperial Aunt." Mo Xiaoyao smiled bitterly, "Imperial Aunt, I have to take Li Li to pay respects to my father and mother. You? Do you have time to talk to Li Li in private?" Great Elder Princess lowered her head and thought for a while. Finally, she said, "You're right. Go and pour tea for your father and mother first. It's the right thing to write Li Er into the genealogy. I will go back in a while. Li Er, don't forget to come and see I later." Yi Li said with a smile, can't Imperial Aunt stay for a few more days? Great Elder Princess sighed and said, I'm old and I'm not used to going out. After you get married, you can go to Ai's place to live more often. Since Great Elder Princess said so, the two of them naturally couldn't stay any longer. Mo Xiaoyao took Yili to burn incense to the ancestors of the Prince Ding mansion, accompanied Great Elder Princess to have lunch, and then personally sent Great Elder Princess out of King Ding's mansion. In the afternoon, Mo Xiaoyao went to the study by himself. Yili also had a lot of things to deal with, so she went back to her courtyard. Looking at King Ding's mansion, which had recovered its tranquility, Yili only felt a little like a dream. In just one day, she had moved from Ye's mansion to King Ding's mansion, got married and became King Ding's consort. And it seemed that she had been completely used to it. Because she had just gotten married, the stewards of King Ding's mansion naturally wouldn't be so tactless as to immediately bother her with a lot of trivial account books. So Yili just needed to take care of the people in her courtyard and the dowry. Back to the courtyard, Nanny Sun was waiting there to chat with Nanny Lin and Nanny Wei. When she saw Yili come in, she hurriedly stepped forward to salute, Princess. Yili said with a smile, Nanny Sun is an old servant of my mother and a trusted person of Prince. You don't have to be so polite. Nanny Sun said a little cautiously, thank you for your kindness, Princess. I dare not overstep my boundaries. I followed the prince's instructions and chose some people to serve Princess. Princess, if you like them, you can keep them by your side. After she finished speaking, she took out a list from her sleeve and presented it. On the list, it was the people who had been assigned to Yili's courtyard. Nanny Sun continued, there should be 4 maidservants serving Princess. In addition, there should be 2 maidservants who take care of Princess's clothing and food. There should also be 4 maidservants for sewing. There should also be 8 second-ranked maidservants serving in the courtyard. There should also be 16 little maidservants who do rough work. These second-ranked maidservants and little maidservants should be handed over to Princess's 2 nannies to handle. But the maidservants who take care of the clothing and food should be personally looked over by Princess. While she was speaking, several maidservants dressed as maidservants walked in and respectfully saluted Yili, greetings to Princess. Yili lowered her head to look at the guts that Nanny Sun had sent over. Not only did the names and ages of these maidservants were written clearly on it, there was also their family background and who was in their family. And they were all children of the Ding Wang Fu's servants. Yili nodded and handed one of the guts to Lin Nanny and Wei Nanny to let them take care of the second and third-ranked maidservants. She turned back and smiled at Nanny Sun, I naturally have confidence in the people that Nanny Sun has chosen. She casually picked out a few people from the list. The maidservants who had been picked quickly came out to give their thanks. Yili ordered Qing Shuang to take out a number of pouches filled with silver coins and rewarded each of them with 1. After taking care of the maidservants, Yili invited Nanny Sun to sit down and talk. As expected, she did as Mo Xiaoyao had said, she spoke without hiding anything. Yili hesitated for a while before asking, Nanny Sun, the Wang Fu, other than De Sa, are there any other womenfolk? Sun Mama was startled for a moment, but she quickly understood what Yili meant. Smiling, she said, replying to the princess, other than the eldest madam and the 2 concubines serving her, there are no other women in the house. Yili looked gloomily at Nanny Sun who was smiling strangely. She nodded to show that she understood. Mo Xiaoyao didn't have any other concubines. This was very good. At least it meant that there was less trouble for her to deal with. Not thinking about the troubles that she could encounter in the future, Yili found that the days in the Ding Wang Fu were as perfect as she had imagined in the beginning. Husband and wife lived in harmony and didn't interfere with each other's private matters. There were no elders to worry about in the morning and at night, no sisters-in-law to chat with, there wasn't even a jealous concubine. If this kind of life continued to be peaceful like this, she would be grateful to Mo Jingli for breaking off the engagement and the meddlesome emperor for granting the marriage. Chapter 86. Prince. Ajin looked strangely at Mo Xiaoyao who was staring at the book. Ajin had followed the prince since childhood. Even though he was slow, he could tell when the prince was thinking and when he was lost in thought. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes flashed and he raised his head to look at him. Is something the matter? Ajin rubbed the back of his head with some annoyance and said, Prince, do you want to go see Wang Fei? Mo Xiaoyao casually put the book back on the table. Looking at Ajin's uneasy state, he smiled faintly and said, Did Chief Steward Mo tell you to ask, or did you ask Nurse Sun? Ajin's eyes widened. Uncle and Nurse Sun had both mentioned that he should mention Wang Fei in front of the prince and find a chance for the prince and Wang Fei to spend more time together. But he didn't know how to find a chance. So when he saw the prince in a daze, which was rare, he thought that since he had nothing to do, he could ask the prince if he wanted to go see Wang Fei, right? Looking at Ajin's puzzled state, Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said with a smile, All right, don't think about it. What is Li doing right now? She seems to be organizing the things she brought from the Yi family. Then don't go now. Let's wait until she forgets. Where are the guests from last night? A hint of annoyance flashed through Ajin's eyes. He said, They're still in the dungeon. Let's go see. In the dark dungeon, the flickering light of the fire projected the shadows of the people in the room onto the walls, swaying slightly with the light. It made the already gloomy dungeon even more mysterious. Feng Zhiao was still dressed in his arrogant and grand red brocade robe. He lazily lay on the only chair in the dungeon and listened with satisfaction to the endless wails. Compared to the boredom of the past few years, he was very satisfied with the busy days of the past few days. Speak, why did you break into the Prince Ding mansion at night? In the center of the room, a black-clothed man was chained to a rack. His body was already riddled with scars, and he was glaring fiercely at him. Feng Zhiao, you're Prince Ding's man. Oh? You know me? Looks like you're from Dechu State. Feng Zhiao blinked his almond-shaped eyes. His interest was piqued. He sat up straight and looked at the person in front of him. Where did you come from? In the palace. Is our emperor still the one from Zhangde Palace? Or which mansion did you come from? Humph. Half of the men of sacrifice were unyielding. Torture had not been able to make him confess. Naturally, Feng Zhiao would not be able to make him talk with just a few words. Feng Zhiao narrowed his eyes in displeasure. This young master wants to see if your bones are harder than this young master's torture tool. Continue. Swish. The ferocious barbed whip continued to create more scars on the man's body. Feng Zhiao stared gloomily at the scene in front of him. The sound of the wheelchair turning came from afar. Feng Zhiao turned around and saw Mo Xiaoyao walking towards him. He stood up and smiled. Why are you here at this time instead of accompanying the bride? Mo Xiaoyao did not answer. He raised his eyebrows and looked at him. Confessed? Feng Zhiao helplessly pulled over the file that was placed at the side. Last night, we caught 4 groups of 7 people. One of them was from the northern tribes, one from the southern Zhao. 2 of them wanted to take advantage of the situation and 3 of them refused to confess. The one from the northern tribes wanted to snatch the bride and make the Ding mansion look bad. The one from the southern Zhao only wanted to scout the terrain to see if there was a chance to get the cloud-embracing sword. The other 2 wanted to take the opportunity to steal something. As for this one, he was the first to be caught and also the one with the best martial arts. I suspect that he's here to assassinate, but the target of the assassination is unknown. He shouldn't be here to assassinate you. When Mo Xiaoyao accompanied the bride back to the bridal chamber, this fellow was ambushed at the banquet area and was caught by the secret guards. So the target of the assassination should definitely be one of the guests present. Someone from the Dechu state. Mo Xiaoyao turned to the hanging man in black and asked. Feng Zhiao rubbed his chin. He knows me. He must be someone from the Dechu state. Young Master Feng San was very famous, but it was only limited to the Dechu state and it was only limited to the capital. After all, a dandy young master who was expelled from the Feng family and did not have the right to inherit would not attract the interest of outsiders. Continue. If you can't get anything out of him, just kill him. Mo Xiaoyao said lightly. Where is Yellow Ping? Feng Xiao gestured towards the room beside him and ignored Mo Xiaoyao. Instead, he stared at the black-clothed man in front of him with interest and laughed. The black-clothed man instinctively felt cold. He obviously knew that if he was caught, there was no way out. However, when he heard Prince Ding casually say to kill him if he couldn't get anything out of him, as if he was saying that the weather was good today, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Prince Ding was definitely not a crippled and useless piece of trash like what outsiders thought. Feng Xiao looked at him with a smile. Actually, to this young master, it doesn't matter if you talk or not. You're going to die anyway, right? If you talk, this young master will give you a quick death. It's fine if you don't talk. You can try out this young master's new toy. These 2 years have been boring to death. A trace of fear flashed through the man's eyes, but he still refused to talk. Feng Xiao didn't mind. He waved his hand and signaled for the people beside him to do it. Then, he swaggered towards Mo Xiaoyao's room. The other room was obviously much more comfortable than the previous one. At least, the entire room was dry and quiet. There wasn't any smell or blood. There was only a metal fence that divided the entire room into 2 halves. The prince of the northern tribes, who was still spouting nonsense last night, was now on the other side of the fence. He grabbed onto the fence and glared at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao, you cripple. How dare you send people to capture I? Oh? I thought that the prince of the northern tribes had entered a place that he shouldn't have and was captured by I. Mo Xiaoyao looked at him with a warm and cold smile. However, the prince of the northern tribes can rest assured. Even if it's because of the diplomatic relations between our 2 countries, I will definitely not harm the prince. Meeting his cold gaze, Yellow Ping couldn't help but tremble. He grabbed onto the fence and shook it even more angrily. Won't harm I? Then why did you lock I up here? I will definitely report this to your emperor. I'll chop off your head. Mo Xiaoyao's lips curled. There are some urgent matters in the northern tribes. In fact, the northern tribes' envoy had already sent a letter to His Majesty to bid farewell. He left the capital in the morning. Yellow Ping was stunned. How is that possible? I's still here, who dares to leave? The prince of the northern tribes need not worry about not being able to return to your country. Later, I will personally send someone to send you back to the northern tribes. Hand it over to the crown prince. Hearing this, Yellow Ping's expression turned ugly. He was a bit of a hooligan, but he wasn't a fool. The crown prince didn't get along with his brother Yellow Yi. The 2 of them had been fighting for many years. If he landed in the crown prince's hands, then, 7th brother would definitely kill him. Mo Xiaoyao, you despicable person. My 7th brother won't let you off. Mo Xiaoyao laughed coldly. He raised his head and stared at him. Yellow Yi dared to send you to provoke I, so he should be mentally prepared to make sure that you won't be able to return. Or, what happened yesterday was the king of the northern tribe's idea. Then it seems like he doesn't really want you as his son. Yellow Ping seemed to have thought of something and his face turned pale. He glared fiercely at Mo Xiaoyao. You're talking nonsense. 7th brother would never do that. His tone was obviously lacking in confidence. He was stupid, but he wasn't stupid. He had been mocked since he was young. Even his 7th brother often scolded him for being stupid. Even his father didn't like him. Could it be that? Chapter 87. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes flashed darkly as he looked at the person in front of him. He no longer looked as smug as he did yesterday. If he could, he would definitely make this prince of the northern tribes die without a complete corpse. Even his bones and ashes would not be enough to quench the hatred in his heart. Unfortunately, this idiot was the prince of the northern tribes and could not die just yet. Just like those people outside, no matter how much he disliked them, no matter how much he hated them, he had to temporarily let them live. Too lazy to look at the person in front of him, Mo Xiaoyao turned and walked out of the prison. Feng Zhiyao was leaning against the wall and looking at him with a grin. You really intend to hand this idiot over to the prince of the northern tribes? Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow and said, just this idiot is not enough. I don't care what method you use to make him spit out everything he knows in 10 days. See if there is anything useful to hand over to Yelu Hong. No matter what method. That's right, no matter what method. I just want an answer. No matter how stupid he is still Yelu Ye's younger brother. I don't believe that he doesn't know anything. Mo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, you know what to do after this. Feng Zhiyao nodded, the smile on his face widening. I understand. He is already pretty stupid. It wouldn't be a surprise if he became even more stupid. Isn't that right? Let Yelu Ping and Yelu Yi fight each other like dogs? I like this idea. Mo Xiaoyao nodded in satisfaction. I'll leave it to you. Take care, Your Highness. Enjoy your new marriage. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao and Jing's figures disappear through the prison door, Feng Zhiyao narrowed his eyes in satisfaction as he looked at the eerie prison in front of him. He could also hear faint pleas for mercy. The smile on his face became even more radiant. What a bunch of idiots. Of all people to provoke, they had to provoke Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao had never been kind since he was 3 years old. Ever since that incident, even his heart had turned black. Reporting to Wang Fei, concubine dowager is here. In the study, Yi Li was sorting out the account books she had brought from the Yi residence when a servant girl came in to report. Yi Li raised her head and was stunned to see the servant girl standing at the door. Qing Shuang had already opened her mouth and said, Jingwen, why are you here? This servant girl was the one who was sent to the sewing room by Yi Li when she was in the Yi residence. Her original name was Han Qing, Jingwen. The maids in King Ding's residence were all dressed in a moon-white robe with a plain-colored belt. This kind of simple yet elegant robe made her look a little flirtatious. Jingwen looked with alarm at Yi Li and said in a low voice, the mama in charge said that the clothes made by Jingwen's embroidery skills are not suitable for Wang Fei to wear. There are 4 first-rate embroiderers in the sewing room, so Jingwen was sent outside to serve. Although she was very happy to be able to leave the sewing room, a trace of shame flashed across Jingwen's face when her embroidery skills were found to be worthless. Yi Li faintly scolded this girl in her heart. This girl had stayed in the sewing room for a month or 2 and still didn't learn to be smarter. Did she think that she didn't have to worry about anything just because she had a good appearance? Alright, you can leave first. Ask concubine dowager to come in. Yi Li waved her hand. Yes, princess consort. Jingwen bowed and respectfully retreated. Qing Shuang complained in dissatisfaction, why did Lin Mama and Wei Mama bring her to young miss? She doesn't look like someone who knows her place. Qing Luan and Qing Yu came later and weren't familiar with Jingwen who had stayed in the sewing room. They only felt that she was too enchanting. Hearing Qing Shuang's words, they immediately looked over. Qing Shuang stomped her feet in annoyance, it's all my fault. I actually forgot to tell Lin Mama. Qing Xia smiled faintly, alright, Qing Shuang, Lin Mama is an old mama who followed Furen. Do you think she can't see what kind of person Jingwen is? What's more, she's just a second-class girl who serves outside. Yun, and Shui, can't be compared to her. Ding Wang Fu is unfamiliar with the people and the place, so she can't do anything. Yi Li put down the book and smiled, Qing Shuang, you still have to learn more from Qing Xia. Don't be rash about everything. Qing Shuang stuck out her tongue, yes, I will follow Wang Fei's order. As soon as she stepped into the reception hall, Yi Li was stunned. A middle-aged woman in her 50s was sitting on the main seat. She was wearing a gorgeous brocade robe and a head ornament with gold and jade inlaid with gems. She looked very noble. If she didn't know her identity beforehand, Yi Li would have thought that she wasn't the old Prince Ding's Sufei, but the Di Fei. At this time, side grand concubine was leaning against the chair and resting with her eyes closed. There were 2 maidservants standing behind her. One had her shoulders lowered and the other was gently fanning herself with a palace fan. Yi Li couldn't help but want to laugh. It wasn't even June yet. The weather in the Chu capital wasn't hot. Wasn't she afraid of catching a cold from the fan? Wang Fei. When everyone saw Yi Li come in, they quickly stood up and bowed. You can leave. I've made side grand concubine wait for a long time. Yi Li waved her hand to let them leave. She frowned and walked to the other side to sit down. Yang side grand concubine slowly opened her eyes and looked at Yi Li with a picky face. Yi Li had a smile on her lips and allowed her to size her up. She turned her gaze to a white-clothed young girl sitting below. That young girl seemed to be very timid. When she met Yi Li's gaze, she immediately shrank back and avoided her in a panic. Side grand concubine has come. Is there a matter? Yi Li looked away and turned to side grand concubine. Yang side grand concubine narrowed her eyes in displeasure. It was clear that she was no longer in her prime and her face darkened. She gave a light snort and said, Wang Fei is too arrogant. You don't know how to greet your elders after passing through the door. This dowager could only come and greet Wang Fei. Yi Li understood. So she had come to find trouble. She frowned with some trouble and looked at side grand concubine with a faint smile. Then this Fei has been rude. But this Fei asked Prince yesterday. The prince only said that he needed to go and greet De Sa after returning home. He didn't mention that there was anyone else in the Wang Fu that this Fei needs to personally greet. Yang side grand concubine's expression froze. It took a while before she recovered. She looked at Yi Li and said, Prince hasn't been in a good mood these years. It's hard to avoid oversights. It's fine if you don't remind him as a Wang Fei, but you dare to be so rude. Remind? Mo Xiaoyao didn't even mention you. It's obvious that he doesn't want to see you. I only reminded him because I ate too much. Long before she got married, Yi Li had already memorized the identities of the members of the Ding King's Fu. For example, the Yang side concubine in front of her. Her identity was really special. Not only was she the only side concubine of the old Prince Ding Mo Lufang, she was also the aunt of Mo Xiaoyao and Mo Xiuwen. She was also the sister of the former Princess Ding. But this identity didn't make her more respected in the Ding King's Fu. In fact, no matter if it was when Mo Lufang was alive or Mo Xiuwen, or now Mo Xiaoyao, they all treated her as heir and ignored her. Yang side grand concubine wasn't even 50 years old this year. She was about the same age as Zhao Yang, eldest princess. But for two women who were widowed at the same time, one would think that they were at least 10 years apart just by looking at their appearance. But Yi Li wouldn't sympathize with her because of this. She could only say that she asked for it. Yang side grand concubine married into the Ding King's Fu when the former Princess Ding gave birth to Mo Xiuwen. After giving birth to Mo Xiuwen, Princess Ding's health became very poor. Her originally loving relationship with Prince Ding also became somewhat cold. Then, 7 years later, she passed away not long after giving birth to Mo Xiaoyao. And compared to Mo Xiaoyao's disregard for side grand concubine, the usually gentle and refined Mo Xiuwen's attitude towards her could be said to be one of disgust. Therefore, Yi Li had enough reason to think that side grand concubine used some unconventional method to marry into the Ding King's Fu and directly caused the relationship between Mo Lufang and Wang Fei to break. Even if she didn't talk about all of this, even if Mo Xiaoyao would take in a concubine in the future, she would definitely not accept anyone from Yi Shan or Yi Lin. If it was said that she found it hard to accept sharing a husband with others, sharing a husband with her biological sister was simply challenging the limits of her tolerance. Chapter 88. I really don't know if there is a need for me to personally pay my respects to a secondary consort. Yi Li said faintly with her clear eyes half closed. You! How dare you! Secondary consort Yang was so angry that her face turned red and she pointed at Yi Li without saying a word. The identity of a secondary consort was the pain of her life. When she married into the prince's residence, she was already a secondary consort and she was not disappointed as she was born from a concubine. After her sister died, She thought that she had the chance to become the main consort because the prince only had her as his secondary consort. However, the prince did not even look at her until he died. Ever since Mo Lufang passed away, she knew that she would never have the chance. Until she died, she could only be a secondary consort and she could not even be buried with Mo Lufang. The prince's residence's consort Yang should know who is the one who is being impudent. Yili raised her head and stared at her faintly. The Ding King's residence respected the prince on the outside and the princess consort on the inside. Not to mention a mere secondary consort, even the proper consort Yang could not embarrass the princess consort. So after Mo Xiaowen passed away, the servants no longer addressed Princess Consort 1 as Princess Consort but as Eldest Madam. This indicated that her identity was the eldest sister-in-law of the prince's princess consort and not the princess consort of the Ding King's residence. After suppressing secondary consort Yang's arrogance, Yili's expression eased and she smiled faintly. Secondary consort Yang, do you have something to say for coming over so early? Secondary consort Yang, who was stunned by her sudden change in expression, regained her senses and her expression changed. She wanted to fly into a rage but the girl in white sitting by the side said uneasily, "Aunt." Secondary consort Yang looked at the girl in white and actually suppressed the anger in her heart. She turned to Yili and said, "This is my maternal family's niece, Chanru." The girl in white stood up and bowed towards Yili and said gently, "Chanru greets cousin-in-law." "Greets cousin-in-law." Yili frowned. The daughter of the Yang family was the niece of the senior concubine, which meant that she was Mo Xiaoyao's cousin. Yili was very unfamiliar with this cousin of hers. The main reason was that the Yang family was not a prestigious family. In fact, other than the first-generation Prince Ding, Mo Lanyun, who married a princess of the previous dynasty, the Mo family's several generations of princesses did not have prominent family backgrounds. Of course, this was because the men of the Mo family did not need nepotism. On the other hand, it was probably to avoid being feared by the royal family. As far as she knew, Princess Yang didn't have a legitimate brother in her mother's family, and the only concubine-born brother died a few years ago. Then Yang Chanru was the orphan of the concubine-born son of the Yang family. "Cousin, you don't have to be so courteous. Sit down." Prince must have forgotten that he hadn't heard him mention his cousin before, so he didn't have time to prepare a greeting gift. "Please don't blame me." While speaking, Yili took off the ice-type jade bracelet on her wrist and put it in Yang Chanru's hand. She smiled and asked senior concubine sitting on the side, "Cousin, do you live with senior concubine?" Senior concubine glanced at Yili and nodded. "Chanru is still young and has no other relatives. So I brought her here and can take care of her. After all, she is not a girl of the prince's mansion. It's okay to live with me." Yili didn't intend to arrange another courtyard. She nodded and smiled. "It's okay as long as cousin and senior concubine don't feel wronged. If you lack anything, just send someone to tell me. Don't be embarrassed." Senior concubine's eyes moved and said, "That's why I brought her to see you. Chanru is almost 17 years old this year. She should have considered marriage long ago. However, Prince usually doesn't see her, and I don't know much about it. Since you are Chanru's representative, then look carefully for her. Also, it's not proper for a girl to be so plain all day. She needs to wear more clothes." Senior concubine said to herself. Yang Chanru, who was sitting at the side, blushed. She lowered her head and refused to look at others. Yili leaned comfortably in the chair and listened to senior concubine speak of her demands. If there was a hint of discussion at the beginning, then it was a commanding tone towards the end. Yili looked at Yang Chanru's snow-white robes and couldn't help but frown. The Fu usually deducts cousins' expenses. Even if Mo Xiaoyao didn't like senior concubine, he wouldn't go so far as to deduct a girl's expenses, right? Looking at Yang Chanru's plain white robes, even her hair was decorated with white ribbons. People who didn't know would think that she was mourning for someone. The Yahuan who had some status in the Fu dressed more appropriately than her. Yang Chanru suddenly raised her head, her eyes filled with tears and panic. She hurriedly said, "No, the Wang Fu didn't mistreat Chanru. Cousin-in-law, Please don't misunderstand cousin Ji, it's Chanru's fault. Yi Li couldn't help rubbing her forehead. What was this? She rubbed her brow and said to Qing Wan, go see if Sun Mama is free. Ask her to come over. Sun Mama came quickly. Qing Wan had clearly told her about the matter, so she brought a steward who was in charge of the Fu's accounts and the expenses. Greetings to Wang Fei. Greetings to senior concubine. The three bowed in unison. Yi Li nodded and said, Sun Mama, you don't have to be so courteous. Sun Mama stood up and said, many thanks, Wang Fei. I heard that Wang Fei summoned this old servant for the matter of the side dowager's courtyard's expenses. This old servant acted on my own initiative and called Steward Wang from the accounting room and Zhang Mama who is in charge of expenses. Wang Fei, please forgive me. Yi Li smiled and said, Sun Mama, you don't have to be like this. I just arrived and Wang Fei is not familiar with these things. Senior concubine mentioned the expenses of Miss Gu, so I asked you to come over and ask. In that case, Sun Mama Zhang, what about Miss Gu's expenses? If Miss Gu suffers any grievances and outsiders know about it, it will be our Wang Fu's fault. Sun Mama Zhang hurriedly stepped forward and said with a bad expression, reporting to Wang Fei, Miss Gu's expenses have always been according to the expenses of the young miss of the Wang Fu. Although there hasn't been a young miss in our Fu for several generations, the previous rules have always been kept. This old servant doesn't dare to deduct Miss Gu's expenses. Then, what is Miss Gu's monthly expenses? If the previous rules are not enough, it doesn't matter if it is adjusted appropriately. Or it can be directly allocated from my and Prince's share. Yi Li said. Sun Mama Zhang glanced at Yang Chanru sitting on the side and said, Miss Gu has 30 taels of silver to spend every month. The cosmetics she uses are all bought by the Fu. She has 4 sets of clothes for each of the spring, summer, autumn, and winter seasons. She also has 2 sets of head ornaments for the beginning of winter and the beginning of summer. She also doesn't dare to reduce her expenses during the holidays. This old servant has served in the Wang Fu for generations and doesn't dare to mistreat Miss Gu. The bookkeeper standing on the side also said, Wang Fei is wise. Prince and Wang Fei are getting married, and everyone in the Fu has rewarded them. The eldest madam received 500 taels, senior concubine received 200 taels, and Miss Gu received 100 taels. The servants in the Fu have also received their rewards. This subordinate doesn't dare to delay and can send the account books as proof. When these words were said, everyone's eyes fell on Yang Chanru. Looking at her white robes and her weak appearance, it was as if she would be blown away by the wind. It really didn't look like she had been mistreated. Sun Mama's upright and serious face flashed with displeasure. Don't say that the Wang Fu didn't mistreat her. Even if you have mistreated her for so many years, isn't it still the Wang Fu that raised you? The prince and princess just got married, what do you mean by wearing white? Chapter 89. The maidservants who followed Yi Li from the Yi family also had opinions about this delicate cousin. Fourth Miss was already delicate and moving, but this one was even more fragile than her. Furthermore, the treatment of this cousin was not much different from the treatment of the Yi family's D-Miss. When their young miss was in the Yi family, she only received 30 taels of silver a month. Furthermore, this Miss Yang did not have any reputation in the capital. It could be seen that this person did not go out to socialize, so naturally, there was no need for her to spend. The young miss had just gotten married, yet she came over to complain that she was poor. It was too much. Yi Li frowned as she looked at the side grand concubine. It wasn't that she was stingy. She had just arrived at the Wang Fu and could not go against the rules set by the predecessors to increase Yang Chanru's treatment. Even if the Ding Wang Fu was large, it was impossible for them to casually withdraw money without any scruples. Without rules, nothing could be accomplished. Furthermore, the Wang Fu had treated Yang Chanru quite well. Unfortunately, the side grand concubine obviously did not think so. Seeing Yi Li's difficult expression, she couldn't help but angrily say, "What does princess mean?" Chanru is still the prince's cousin. Can't it be that a few taels of silver can't be spent? If outsiders know that our Ding Wang Fu mistreats an orphan girl whose parents are dead, the prince's face will not look good. In short, the side grand concubine wanted to put the reputation of mistreatment on Mo Xiaoyao's head. Then, how much does side grand concubine think is reasonable? The side grand concubine frowned and said with an unwilling expression, it should be 80 taels of silver a month. There are also head ornaments and accessories. How can 2 sets be enough? Chanru can't go out to meet people these few years and even her marriage has been delayed. In the future, there will be many times when she goes out with you. Let Fenghua Building send over 4 sets. Seeing the side grand concubine's matter-of-fact expression, Yili couldn't help but roll her eyes in her heart. When did she agree for Yang Chanru to follow her? Even if she did not go out these few years, she could still link it to the Wang Fu. If it wasn't for the Prince Ding mansion, with the Yang family's background, they might not even remember the concubine daughter of the Prince Ding mansion. Side imperial concubine, please be careful with your words. Wang Fei is the mistress of the Ding palace. It was impossible for him to bring an unmarried girl with him when he was walking around outside. Even if there is, it should be a girl from the prince's mansion or a sister from the princess family. Sun Mama said with a serious face. Yili couldn't help but praise him in her heart. She didn't want to go on blind dates with a weak girl who would shed tears at the sight of flowers and rain. Hearing Granny Sun's words, Yang Chanru's face turned red. She let out a low cry and clutched her chest. Tears welled up in her eyes and were about to fall. Without waiting for side grand concubine to get angry, Yili frowned and said to the 3 people, since you've asked clearly, Steward Wang and Mammy Zhang should go back first. In addition, I will allocate 10 taels of silver from my monthly allowance to Miss Biao. Since she's a guest, we can't let Miss Biao suffer. Yes, we will follow Princess's orders. Steward Wang and Mama Zhang responded and retreated. Yili continued, side grand concubine and Miss Biao should also go back first. As for Miss Biao's marriage, I will discuss it with the prince before giving a reply to side grand concubine. Side grand concubine was unwilling, but when she saw Yili's expression of wanting to see them off, she didn't dare to go against Yili's intentions. She could only angrily leave with the aggrieved Yang Chanru. After sending the 2 off, Yili looked at Sun Mama and said, Sun Mama. Steward Wang and Mammy Zhang's salaries will be increased by 10 taels this month. Just take it from me. Sun Mama complied and looked at Yili, saying, actually, Princess doesn't need to pay attention to side grand concubine and Miss Biao. Our Wang Fu has never treated Miss Biao unfairly. We haven't touched a single cent of the inheritance that the Yang family left to Miss Biao. Yili helplessly said, look at what she's wearing today. What would others think if they saw her like this? Sun Momo pursed her lips and said, Princess Consort, you may not know this, but this Miss Biao is very strange. It's said that she likes white very much. The clothes we sent for the 4 seasons were all colors that girls like, but Miss Biao said that they were tacky. She was only willing to wear white clothes. If the clothes we sent didn't have white, she would rather wear her old clothes. She ruined a lot of clothes for no reason. The steward of the Fu had no choice but to send white clothes. For the prince and princess's wedding, Mama Zhang had specially ordered people to make a set of peach red and a set of light purple. Who knows? Tacky? Not necessarily, right? Yili thought of another person who liked to wear plain clothes. In the future, there will be many guests in the Wang Fu. We can't let her come out to meet people like this. In the past, the Wang Fu basically didn't interact with outsiders. Now that Mo Xiaoyao was married and had come out to meet people, it wouldn't do to close the doors and refuse guests. I'll go back and ask Prince if he wants to change out of all the plain clothes. Thinking, Yili said with a slight smile. Sun Mama froze for a moment, then immediately reacted, what does princess mean? I didn't say anything. I just don't like white clothes. Yili said with a smile. Princess, Prince invites you. Mo Xiaoyao didn't have any servant girls to serve him, So the one who came to deliver the message was one of Mo Xiaoyao's personal guards. Yili nodded and stood to ask, "Where is the prince right now?" The guard said, "The prince is waiting for princess in the water pavilion." "I know. You can go." The Dingwang Fu could be said to be the largest fu in Jing City. Of course, this was related to the position of the Dingwang Fu in the Dechu state. The Wang Fu had been remodeled by successive princes for over 100 years. Even though the area hadn't expanded, the scenery inside the Wang Fu could be called the best in Jing City. In the southwest corner of the Wang Fu, there was a natural lake that took up 1/6 of the entire Wang Fu. There was a wooden corridor built on the surface of the lake that led to a water pavilion with 3 rooms in the middle of the lake. The surface of the lake was covered in green lotus leaves, making the lake water ripple. Just walking in, one could feel a faint coolness. It must be a good place to relax in the summer. Waving her hand to stop the servant girls, Yili walked alone along the corridor on the surface of the lake towards the pavilion in the middle of the lake. As expected, she saw Mo Xiaoyao sitting in front of the open window, lost in thought. Hearing her footsteps, Mo Xiaoyao came back to his senses and said with a smile, "Li." Yili walked in, "What are you thinking about?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said with a smile, "I've been busy with some trivial matters these past 2 days. I didn't have time to ask if you're used to it." Yili shrugged and found a place to sit across from him. She said with a smile, "My ability to adapt has always been very good. The people in the Wang Fu are also very good. I'm very used to it." Seeing Mo Xiaoyao looking at her with a strange expression, Yili blinked her eyes and said with a smile, "It can't be that you're not used to it, right?" She didn't expect Mo Xiaoyao to actually nod his head and said with a smile in a low voice, "I'm indeed not used to it. It seems, it's been many years since I was the only one in this Wang Fu. And, do you need me to leave?" Yili was a little apologetic. She didn't think that her existence would cause trouble for Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao laughed involuntarily and shook his head. "How could that be? Li, I thought that we were husband and wife." "So? I feel that we need to spend more time together," Mo Xiaoyao said. Yili understood. Some people would habitually avoid things that they were not used to, but others would choose to face them head-on. Mo Xiaoyao clearly belonged to the latter. For a couple like them who clearly had no feelings before marriage, they needed to cultivate feelings after marriage. "Do you have any good suggestions?" Mo Xiaoyao said, "If you have time, you can accompany me to talk or read a book. Or if you don't feel ashamed, I can accompany you for a walk."